across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
6:03, Talk Breakfast. Mark Dolan in for the brilliant Jeremy Kyle, and oh boy, have we got work to do. Breaking this morning, if I win, you win. It is the biggest stunt in British political history. But will Nigel Farage's great gamble pay off? With the other main parties not running a candidate, will a by-election victory in Clacton-on-Sea be legitimate? Now, the Reform UK leader frames this contest as the people versus the system. So will it work? Can Nigel Farage bring down the establishment? We're going to get reaction to this extraordinary political development from across the spectrum, including from the Deputy Leader of Reform UK. No, that's Richard Tice. Zia Yusuf, Shadow Home Secretary, is live at 9. But what do you think? Our question this morning is a very simple one. Will Nigel Farage have the last laugh? My phone number is 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222 or leave us a voice note, and as the saying goes, let's talk. Lovely to have your company. You can hear us on the radio, DAB+, in-app and online. You can also watch the show. Head to YouTube, search Talk, and up we pop. Front pages, The Times. Labour and Tories won't fight Farage's fake contest. Reform UK leader resigns as an MP to stand in a new by-election as he faces an investigation into gifts. Meanwhile, Prince Harry loses his case against the publisher of the Daily Mail. Front page of the Mail, feeling very, very bullish this morning in regard to the Duke of Sussex. This was nothing less than a conspiracy to destroy the Daily Mail, vindicated in a 46-day High Court case costing over £50 million. 7 claimants, including Prince Harry, Baroness Lawrence and Elton John, accused the Mail of 57 counts of illegal information gathering. Over 40 of their journalists defended themselves in the witness box, and yesterday, in a landmark ruling, one of Britain's top judges rejected every single allegation. Is this a victory for the free press? And what happens to Prince Harry now? Daily Express, let the people be the judges of my actions, says Nigel Farage. The Reform UK leader triggers a shock by-election, but rival parties will not field candidates. The Guardian, Farage's £5 million gift reported over money laundering concerns. The Sun newspaper, crushing High Court defeat. Harry caned, there in reference to the Duke of Sussex. Daily Star, Prince, it's whitewash, hacked off. Harry, Elton and 5 others lose huge privacy case. And last but not least, the Daily Telegraph, Farage gamble turns to farce. Let's get reaction from a former Conservative special advisor and regular presenter here at Talk, Charlie Rowley. Good morning, Charlie.
Good morning, Mark. Good to see you.
Great to see you. Will Farage's gamble pay off?
Well, that is the big question, I suppose, this morning. He's seized control of the narrative on the back of, questions about his finances, about money that he's taken from a crypto banker, this £5 million that wasn't going away in terms of the questions that were being asked. There were more allegations last weekend of some of the people that are around him, this George Cottrell character, and had Nigel received benefits in kind.
George.
Posh George.
Yeah, because you're Posh Charlie. and we've got a slight issue. You're Posh Charlie. You've not given me any money yet.
Not yet. Oh, not yet. The morning's early. There's still time. There's still time. I'd like to come back. So you never know. There might be something in it for you. But all of these allegations have mounted up and caused questions for Nigel, to a point in which yesterday he obviously decided that enough was enough, having been hounded, as he put it, by the media, particularly Sky News, who he took to task, and he has decided actually to get back control of the narrative. He is going to give a speech, as he gave yesterday, declaring, I think, everything out in the open and saying, look, now it's up to the people of Clacton and my local constituency, not as in his local constituency, not mine, I don't live there, but this is him saying, in my local constituency, back me or sack me. And that's what he's done.
Well, if you missed it, here is a portion of Nigel Farage's truly extraordinary and unexpected speech yesterday.
I've thought about it hard, and I've decided today I will resign as a Member of Parliament for Clacton-on-Sea, thereby forcing a by-election, which should happen, I hope, in short order. No, I've decided that the people of Clacton should be the judges of my actions. This will be a people versus the establishment by-election. It's a chance to stick two fingers up to the entire establishment, to frankly tell them where to go. And that is why I will be putting my name forward to stand in this by-election. I will fight to win. I will fight to continue the political revolution that reform has started. And I would say this to you, the voters of Clacton: if I win, you win. Because if I lose, they win, and we will never, with the two old parties, get the type of fundamental change that we need to fix broken Britain.
Now, yesterday, Nigel Farage, the Reform UK leader, posted the following on X. I will make a statement on my future in public life at 2 p.m. That post has now reached 8.1 million people. It was a seismic political moment. What did you think was going to happen? Because many very experienced journalists and Fleet Street hacks thought he was about to resign.
I didn't quite think that. I know there'd been a bit of chatter, but that's just in the column inches of the newspapers about whether he was in it for the long haul, whether he was getting fed up of all those questions, whether he was actually not wanting the continued invitation of the media intrusion, as he put it, into his parliamentary life. He just wanted to get on and run things. He wants to sort of become Prime Minister, but he's at a point where he thought, no, I'm just going to jack it all in. It's become too much. I never thought that. I thought he might have resigned as the MP for Clacton to say, you know what, maybe I'm taking time away, this is a stitch-up, I'm not having it, I'm going to continue to lead the party from the outside to campaign. So it gives him a bit of a break from the Clacton, from Clacton. Not that anybody wants a break from Clacton, it's a very nice place.
I was there 2 weeks ago with Nigel for half a day, working with the Daily Express, and it's a beautiful location.
Yeah, very nice too. So, you know, why would you want to?
And how perfect is this? Nigel's office is about an 11-second walk from the Weatherspoons.
Perfect. What more could you ask?
It couldn't be more on brand. And I spent half a day with him. He was very relaxed, in rude health, cracking jokes, dropping truth bombs. Probably the most honest interview that he's given in recent times, and it was for the Daily Espresso podcast, which was on YouTube if you're interested. And by the time we'd finished the encounter, we were in the pub with the locals, sinking pints.
Yep.
So Nigel Farage genuinely does go to the pub and he does drink beer. The guy's authentic, and I wonder whether we saw more of that authenticity yesterday.
I think that's 100% correct.
What you see is what you get.
Totally. And the passion and the frustration that he's obviously endured from some of the media, and I think from what he calls the mainstream media and the establishment. He really feels that they're out to get him. So
he's very human, isn't he? In his own way. For somebody that's such an iconic figure and such a consequential figure, he's very human. You know, he wears his heart on his sleeve.
Yeah, and all of that came out yesterday. You know, as he said, he's lived through this for 30 years, you know, from being an MEP to, you know, quitting his job in the city to being in politics. He's sacrificed an awful lot, what he sees, for the benefit of the country, not just Brexit, but obviously fighting for different things in the UK, as he's now sort of doing by leading reform. So he takes this personally, and I think it has now just got to a boiling point where he's thought, right, OK, this really is going to be about the people versus the establishment. And just taking back to the idea that his post got over 8 million, did you say?
8.1 million.
8.1 million.
How many other people could achieve that? The Prime Minister couldn't achieve that.
Precisely. Absolutely. So this really will be, I think, a wake-up call to people that still doubt reform, maybe, that still question whether they've got the support or the momentum. Because then what we'll see is, regardless of other candidates standing against him in the by-election, which most of the parties, as far as I can see, have said that they're not going to do that, nationally the polls might show that this is a good thing for reform, because they will row in behind Nigel. All of his supporters that might have, not been active, let's say, politically active since the local elections, since they've come out to vote in May. That was only a month ago. But they might all be galvanised now. They might all be descending to Clacton to go and show their support for Nigel. So it could be a huge demonstration over the next... I mean, it will take 4 weeks to conclude a by-election, at least. That will be 4 weeks of Nigel continuing to set out his stall, continuing to talk up the policies that he wants to talk about, continuing to trash the mainstream media, continuing to target the establishment. He will have all of that focus, and I think he will galvanise support. And there's a vacuum there if candidates aren't standing against him.
Most definitely. Well, you mentioned candidates not standing against him. Cliff in Berkshire has messaged the show. First text of the day. Good morning, Cliff. Good morning, Mark, and hello, Charlie. I'm pretty sure the other parties would field candidates if they thought they could win. Mark in Selby, Mark, play your cards right, and your posh friend Charlie may give you a tip. Well, I do take tips, actually. I take cash tips. And he's welcome to whip out a fiver or a tenner, and he can insert it somewhere very intimate, because I got bills to pay. I'm just, all I am, a bit like Tina Turner, a private dancer, but just on the radio and on the telly. Good morning, Mark. Chris in Cumbria here. I couldn't help but think yesterday when Starmer had the hypocrisy to say Farage was up to his neck in sleaze. Unlike him, up to his neck in designer glasses and suits paid for by Lord Ali. Brilliant text, Chris. And don't forget, tickets to the Arsenal. What an Arsenal. Love Cumbria, by the way. Aren't you lucky living in Cumbria, one of the most beautiful parts of the country? Mick says, good morning, Mark. Now that the High Court case against the Mail has concluded, Mr Neville Lawrence has been able to give his measured, sobering, honest side of the story as reported by that paper, instead of the self-serving activism that we'd been fed previously, apparently encouraged by Harry. Mick, thank you for that. We're going to talk about Prince Harry later. I'm delighted that the Mail have been vindicated. All the allegations against them thrown out by Justice Nicklin. And it's a good day for the free press and for free speech. A bad day for Prince Harry. Where does he go from here? I'll be asking Ingrid Seward, the editor of Majesty magazine, a little later in the show. And don't forget, Reform UK's Shadow Home Secretary. It's the flagship interview of the day at 9 a.m. here on Talk Breakfast. Zia Yusuf, live at 9. And there's a simple question I'll be asking him, and it's my question to you at 15 minutes past 6 on a Wednesday morning. Will Nigel have the last laugh?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Talk Breakfast, 6:17. Mark Dolan with you in the absence of the brilliant Jeremy Kyle, who's back tomorrow. We've got a lot to get through today. Prince Harry loses his legal action against the Daily Mail. What are the implications for Harry financially and reputationally? And what about the Sussex brand? And of course, he had to come back to the UK to receive that rather embarrassing news. But politics is the dominant story of the day. Will Nigel Farage have the last laugh, or will this by-election gamble backfire? Well, let's take a listen to Farage talking about the other options at his disposal.
Now, the issue with my daughter was the final straw. Enough is enough. And I thought over the weekend, what shall I do? I could go out and try and make some real big money. I could go to the USA, where I've got plenty of offers. And then I thought, why should I be judged, today or in history in the future, by Sky News and their ilk?
Baz has messaged the show. Good morning, Mark. I don't care if Nigel Farage gets money off the mafia or Russia, frankly, as long as he makes this country great again and puts right what these two useless parties have done over the years. Keith in Nottingham. Good morning, Mark. So whether Nigel's £5 million is good or bad, if he needs some help as to what to do with it, I know a royal couple in America that need a couple of quid. Keith, you're absolutely right about that. I'm hearing that Harry losing that legal action against the Mail could cost him up to $10 million. Stevie in Cornwall, good morning, Mark. Brilliant manoeuvre from Nigel. Firstly, it's taken the spotlight off the Labour Party and the so-called King of the North. Hung his chin out for the party to punch, and they've bottled it because they're too chicken. Personally, when Nigel gets elected again, he should go to the chamber in a chicken suit. Well, thank you for that. Live in the studio, former Conservative Special Advisor Charlie Rowley and talk star as well. Charlie, let's take a look again at this message from Baz in West Brom. I don't care if Nigel gets money off the mafia or even Russia, frankly, as long as he makes this country great again. Well, that's interesting. How damaging do you think these allegations about cash are to Nigel Farage?
I don't think they're... Well, they've clearly had an impact because it's prompted him to do what he's done and cause a by-election. But I think...
But do the public care? Are the public down the pub talking about this $5 million? Are they talking about Christopher Harborne or Posh George?
I think when things are going well in a country, this will give people something to talk about, and they want their... You know, when things are going incredibly well, they want all their politicians to be whiter than white, and they want them to be, you know, the most honest, you know, priest going, as it were. But when things are so bad, when you feel like Britain is broken... people, I think, are more interested in fixing those problems rather than the you know, whether or not somebody has claimed £5 million. It's a huge sum of money. It's in British politics. There'll be people that really might be turned off by it. I think, but the majority of people will just think, right, it looks interesting. Who just gives somebody £5 million cash free, or, you know, with no strings attached? That is odd. But, you know, if he's got friends in high places, then that's OK, fine, to a certain extent. But we are in such a place as a nation that just there are so many things that need fixing. And Nigel is the, you know, anti-establishment candidate. He's the one that has come forward, who's led reform to sort of change and, you know, all of the things that we really tear our hair out, whether it's stopping the small boats, whether it's getting the economy moving in the right direction, cutting taxes, reforming welfare. Forming a coalition again of the country with, you know, he's taking support from Labour and the Tories. You know, no one has seen that since Boris Johnson. So he's very popular, and when there are so many problems, as I say, that popularity I think probably outweighs, because of what he's saying, outweighs some of the questions around just finances.
Well, Nigel Farage has framed this by-election as the people versus the establishment. I want to hear from the people this morning, because that's what talk is about. That is our DNA. It's all about your opinions. Our question this morning is a simple one. Will Nigel have the last laugh? Here's a voice note from Lee.
Morning, Mark and Charlie. Lee here from Scarborough in his van, off to work, veteran. I think what they've done to Nigel's absolutely disgusting. Absolutely. I mean, the man got the money when he wasn't even an MP. What's it got to do with people? It's like somebody gave me a tenner. I mean, it's a bit different, like, but... And me not turning around to wife and saying, oh, you know, where you got that from? I'm telling you, it's a stitch-up, biggest stitch-up in political history for me, this. I've got to say, Nigel, I mean, the harassment he's had over the years and his security being not paid for, it's a bloody stitch-up. I'm absolutely fuming.
Lee, thank you for that. I really appreciate you calling because that comes from the heart. And I think you speak for many people who are much more worried about inflation, which could reach 6% by the end of the year. And I'm sorry, Rachel, it's not all because of the war in Iran. They're worried about school places, about rent, about mortgage rates, about the lack of availability of housing. They're worried about the boats which continue to come thick and fast, up to 1,000 people a day, which is costing us billions. That's what people are worried about, not Nigel Farage's bank account. But let's take another clip, if we can, from Farage's speech yesterday in regard to whether the press would rather that MPs had no assets at all.
It would seem from the last couple of years, from the way I've been treated, that the press would rather our members of Parliament had no assets and no wealth at all. They seem to fundamentally object to any MP that has outside income. Indeed, they view those that have continuing business interests with severe scepticism. Making money is not a crime.
Wait a minute, though, Charlie Rowley, because making money, business interests, that's not how you could describe the hard-born cash. That was a £5 million gift. Do you not think that Nigel Farage is being a little duplicitous there by sort of framing it that, look, I'm a successful entrepreneur, I've made money? Well, no, you've been given money by a rich man. It's not the same thing.
Yeah, and you know, I think also, you know, in relation to, you know, how many properties he's got, you know, 4 or 5, or whether he rents some others or whatever.
He's got more houses than Phil Spencer off of location. He's got more houses than Kirsty Allsop with her floral dresses.
Exactly. So he's, I think he's getting himself... I think he's trying to paint a very clear picture about the kind of people that should be in politics. These are people who should be wealth creators, people that have experienced life in business, people that have got connections internationally that can bring investment into the UK. He's trying to put a good spin on it. But it's not necessarily... I don't think there's a problem. Of course there isn't a problem with people doing well and earning a lot of money and having a lot of assets and being in business and being successful. But it's about the declaration of it. I think that's just... because that's the nuts and bolts of it. Whatever he received, whether it was £5 million from a crypto banker in Thailand, whether it is having all the properties and all the assets and all the wealth that he's accumulated over time through other business interests or whatever he's got, I don't think people really worry about that. I think the Parliamentary Standards Committee and other MPs from opposition parties, as you'd expect, just want that to be declared. And this is where we have this grey area where he's saying, I received all of this and I made all this wealth and I received that £5 million before I became an MP. Now, was it 12 months before he became an MP where you should be declaring as much as you can? It probably was. But he was saying, his view is, and he's saying he's done nothing wrong, is that that was a personal gift.
Which you don't have to declare.
Which you don't have
to principle.
On principle. But the Parliamentary Standards Committee and the handbooks that they give you and all the rest of it, and the assumption when you become an MP is that you should declare, even if you're unsure whether it's personal or whether it has been for other work, and for other, like when he was a presenter himself and still presents a show, he was getting a huge social media following. He had a few, it was reported in the Sunday Times article that a few people were paid to help him do better on social media, to get his social media figures up. So is that in another job? Did that need to be declared? This is a grey area, but the parliamentary standards would have expected, I think, you to declare more just to be willing and more open, maybe than what you need to be because of your profile in public life.
I just wonder, though, whether the parliamentary authorities don't have a leg to stand on because they can never prove beyond reasonable doubt that this wasn't a gift. How can they prove it?
Well, they can't.
Unless they have developed the power of mind reading, Charlie Rowley.
But
It would be interpretation. It would be inference. And inference is the word that did for Prince Harry yesterday in the High Court, because Mr. Justice Nicklin said, all of your claims against the Daily Mail are inference, not facts.
Yep. And if that is all that's concluded, so if it is the case that the Parliamentary Standards Authority just simply
How can't it be?
Well, if they just conclude that
it's Nigel's word against theirs. He said it was a gift.
But it could be a gift. But it's just whether
it was a gift.
Well, it was a gift. But it should it have been declared? Yes or no? That's the question.
You're not supposed to declare gifts. You don't have to.
Well, 12 months before you become an MP, I think you're supposed to declare... Well, the parliamentary authorities will ask you to declare as much as you feel as you should, and some.
Anything that it relates to your political activities.
And that's why it's a... they can't prove...
It's not a grey area!
It's a gift.
It was a gift!
But that's what Parliament will
Rowley's struggling. Can someone get him a coffee, please? I know it's early.
That's what Parliament will expect. They will just expect you to declare as much as you possibly
yeah, but this is also woolly. And this is the problem with the authorities. And that's why Farage is right to frame this as being weaponised and politicised against him. If he says it was a gift, it was a gift. There's no reasonable way they can prove that that's not true.
But
I know it's unusual. I'll grant you 5 million. It's not exactly a box of roses, is it? Do you remember roses?
I do remember roses.
Whatever happened to roses? They got overtaken by celebrations, didn't they?
No, I'm still a big fan of the roses.
Yeah. Are you more roses than celebrations?
I like a strawberry cream, yes.
And then there's the Cadbury's Heroes. But we got to... Can I ask you to stay focused? Because this is a grown-up media show. Zia Yusuf, who has some job at Reform UK, is live at 9 on this programme. But look, I'm obviously having some fun with you here. But, I mean, Nigel, it is very much his word against the authorities. In some ways now, he's created this narrative that it's me versus the system. So even if he is punished, he'll actually use that to his own advantage.
Totally.
He'll be the martyr, won't he?
Look, it's the same sort of tactic as Boris Johnson proroguing Parliament early, trying to get the Brexit deal through, then proroguing Parliament and saying, look, Parliament is blocked.
Right.
It's all the anti-establishment parties, all the anti-Brexiteers. So now we've got to go to a general election, and he won a stonking majority, Boris Johnson. So it's a similar tactic. I mean, if I was advising Nigel, if I would probably say, look, you can probably only do this once. And I think there comes a point where, OK, you can enjoy the ride now, you can enjoy the campaigning, that's where you're on the front foot, where you can get all your message out over the next 4 weeks or more during that campaign. But I would now just declare absolutely everything, any gifts, even if personal, even if it goes back to...
Why should you?
I think because he has now opened, I think, the door, rightly so, to saying, I'm successful, I've been very wealthy, I've made a lot of money. I haven't made as much money as I could because I left the city to go into politics as an MEP. So I've lost money, but I've earned money. But that's all, and you can see everything here now, even things that I shouldn't be declaring. I'm just dumping it all out there, and then everyone can sort of... So he doesn't have this continue, because it is tiring. This will be tiring.
So you actually, looking back on it, you think that actually what Nigel should have done is taken a slightly more pragmatic view when he became an MP and thought, well, look, it was a gift from Christopher Harborne, but I might as well just be super upfront and declare it anyway. And it's a little bit like being very straight with the tax man.
Yes.
Because it's better that way round. Is that kind of how you're sort of characterising this one?
I think so. I think now we've got to a point where Nigel has made such a big statement.
If he had his time,
yesterday.
do you think he would have declared time again? Do you think he would have declared it?
No, probably not, because I think he's very firm in what he believes, which is that he's done nothing wrong. It was a gift. It's not for Parliament to decide, and it wasn't for Parliament to look at, because it's his personal finances, and it was given to him when he wasn't an MP. That's his position, and it's a very clear one, and it's not one that I'd... argue with. I completely understand it, and I'm sympathetic to it. But I just think that there is... that could be 100% true, and I'm sure that it is, don't get me wrong. But when you go into Parliament, when you're in public life, you're not just leading a campaign organisation, you're not a CEO of a company anymore, you are a democratically elected MP where there are rules, where there are procedures, where there is more intrusion into your life, because you are a public figure that will have to be held to the same bar and standards as every other MP. And even if you don't declare things, you see MPs having to apologise all the time for for not declaring even the smallest of gifts or benefits in kind. So I think it's better now that he's had this big conversation with the public to declare everything, get everything out, go over and above. He'll win the by-election, I'm sure of it. I'm sure I can say that before the actual election is actually moved. Well, you know, there are no real other candidates, so it would be pretty extraordinary if he didn't win it.
It's not going to stop us declaring you the political Nostradamus if he does win.
But it also prevents a second by-election. This is the problem that we've got, because the Standards Committee, I don't think, will drop this.
Well, I'm really glad you mentioned that, and I think that's another win for Farage, because he's called this by-election effectively by resigning. If he's then done over by the Privileges Committee and the parliamentary authorities, and then they force a second by-election, he will frame that as how absurd the system is. He will just say, look, this is crazy. I've just won a by-election and they're making me fight another one. This is how the establishment operates. So he'll weaponise that too. They can't win. You can't win with Nigel Farage. It's like negotiating with the Iranians, you know what I mean? It's just, it's non-stop bear traps.
Well, it is.
Because it's all noise, and that's what he thrives on.
Well, it is all noise, and for now. And what makes it so fascinating is that you've got the Prime Minister attempting to come out yesterday to say that, you know, Nigel's up to his neck in sleaze. Hello, the Prime Minister's having to resign because of scandal within his own party, appointing Pina Banson and all the other benefits that he received in kind that he didn't declare that you listed earlier on. The idea that other parties aren't putting up candidates when they were very happy to put up candidates in Makerfield, which I argued they shouldn't have done. I thought that should have been a clear run between Reform and the Labour Party, because that was a stitch-up as well. People are criticising Nigel for making this a whole song and dance and a farce about Nigel. Hello, Labour had to parachute in Andy Burnham, that wasn't even MP.
Andy Burnham, right, self-styled King of the North, is worried about democracy, you know, with this. Yeah, that Andy Burnham, that's like a fox worrying about the welfare of hens, isn't it, in the hen house?
Yes.
Make it make sense. We've got a great text from James. This show, let me tell you, is not an echo chamber. And if you disagree with me, I don't just allow it, I love it. James says, sorry, Mark, you are incorrect. We are concerned about where our politicians get their money from. I'm always suspicious of anyone who wants to be the Prime Minister and that makes the rules for the rest of us. And I want to know who's in the background, who is potentially greasing the wheels of power. So, yes, I do want all MPs to be scrutinised to a much higher level than a normal person. This by-election is nothing but a pointless stunt, says James. James, thank you for that. We do welcome all opinions. In fact, we love it. I want to make an apology because I only mentioned, in terms of these lovely confectionery treats that you will give someone as a thank you, you have the roses, you have celebrations, and you have Cadbury's Heroes. Of course, I forgot Quality Street, who are in many ways, maybe they're the boss.
Yes, yeah, the green triangles.
Isn't it?
Truffles, yeah.
And the hazel and caramel. Let me know your preferred confectionery treat. The Quality Street, the roses, Cadbury's Heroes and celebrations. Forget about Makerfield and Clacton-on-Sea. That's the real debate this morning. But, folks, I want to ask you whether this move by Farage is going to backfire. Will Nigel have the last laugh? I'll be taking your calls later, 0344 499 1000. We know you're busy, so drop us a text in the meantime or drop us a voice note, which is exactly what Mandy has done.
Morning, Charlie. Lovely to see you both, especially Charlie. He's one of my favourites. I just want to quickly say, you know, I think Nigel has been treated terribly. You know, he's a human being. Politics has got really, really dirty. Now, I don't know very much about politics, but, you know, I was going to vote Reform, but I'm swaying a bit more towards Kemi. I like her. I like what she says, but then we all like what they say till they get in. I don't know, but I wish Nigel well. I think he's been treated appalling.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk Now.
Well, top of the morning, it is Talk Breakfast, 6:39. Mark Dolan in for the brilliant Jeremy Kyle. And Reform UK's Shadow Home Secretary, Zia Yusuf, is live on this show at 9 a.m. You won't want to miss it. Live in the studio, former Conservative Special Advisor and Talk star Charlie Rowley. So many messages coming in. Good morning, you lovelies, says Jane, who's given us a massive kiss, which I'm very honoured to receive, Jane, and let me send it straight back to you. Jane says, did you notice that smirk on Keir Starmer's face? What a nasty man. I do hope Nigel wins. Going after his daughter is a disgrace. How that man gets through his life daily is a feat in itself. Jane, thank you for that. Ray in Huntingdon has messaged the show. Good morning, Mark. Good morning, Charlie. I think the other parties have shown their true colours by not standing in Clacton. It shows they do not want Clacton's residents' votes. This, albeit a small opportunity, may be the only chance they have to get rid of Nigel. They keep saying how bad he is and how much damage he's going to do to the country, yet will not take the opportunity. Charlie, what do you make of the likes of Labour, the Tories and the Lib Dems not running in this by-election?
Well, I think it is I do think it's a mistake, probably. I mean, I think they should have put up candidates. If they're going to put candidates up in Makerfield and try and create the argument that, you know, every person should have the opportunity to vote for that political party, then they should do it in Clacton. But I can understand why they feel that this is Nigel taking matters into his own hands. He's causing this by-election. He's causing what they would see as a huge distraction from the actual questions that he's got to answer about those finances and about the gifts that he has received and the investigation that the Standards Committee are looking into. So he's got to answer those questions. Until he does, they're not going to be dancing to his tune. I totally understand that. But the reality is, I think there might not be a second by-election. You know, if he does actually put everything out there, win the by-election comfortably, now that he hasn't got any opponents, I think it would be perfectly reasonable for the Standards Committee to come back to say, right, we think that Nigel should have declared everything. He didn't, but he has declared it now and stood in a by-election and been returned, so it would be unwise to have a second by-election. So,
well, I agree. I mean, I think it is a masterstroke from Farage because it's going to embarrass the authorities if they then have to provoke yet another by-election. So he has created a landmine or a political bear trap for them. The authorities, notwithstanding his guilt or otherwise, will be reluctant to provoke yet another by-election. So he's already won in a sense politically.
I think so, and he's now got this, as I say, this 6-week period. You know, whenever the by-election
great platform,
a great platform.
Endless hustings speeches,
completely unopposed. Exactly, and this is why I think it's not just about Clacton.
It's going to be the Nigel show.
Well, it will be, exactly, and that will just be a free hit that the other parties, I don't think, will be able to. If they're not standing, well, then they can't complain.
6 weeks of non-stop publicity.
Yeah, and that's why I think they should have at least put up other candidates to try and fight that.
Is it an insult to the people of Clacton-on-Sea, who I spent time with 2 weeks ago? Very, very decent people, patriotic people who work hard, alarm clock Brits. Is it an insult to them that the other parties are not participating?
Well, the way in which Nigel framed the debate is that, look, you know, if he wins, we win, we in inverted commas being, you know, his supporters and his base and people that believe that he's done nothing wrong and believe that the establishment is out to get him. But if he said if he loses, we, again, inverted commas, lose, well, there's an opportunity to send a message to Nigel Farage. There's an opportunity to maybe eat into his majority if people chose wanted to do so. Of course, they won't get that opportunity now because the other parties aren't putting up candidates. So I think it is a a slight misstep. But what this will do is, as I say, I think this will just galvanise his support right across the country. And so he will win in Clacton. He will be returned with a huge majority, unopposed. That will do well for him, that will do well for the Reform Party, that will do well for his base right across the country, who will see this as a man that's being attacked by the media. We've got to get outside of this Westminster political chess-playing bubble that we're currently in, where parties are saying, no, we're not going to stand here, but we'll stand here. It is a soap opera. People will see this as, OK, they probably think that Nigel should have declared what he hasn't done, but can understand it was a personal gift and can understand why he didn't need to, but maybe he should have done, who knows. But that is such small fry compared to the bigger argument of, he feels as though his family is being hounded. He feels that he's being hounded, and he gave some examples yesterday of where he feels his life has been threatened and where he has been threatened repeatedly by activists and people that just don't like him. His family have been pursued. That became clear yesterday against a denial of Sky News, which they were wrong to do so. So all of this is coming out where actually people are starting to see we're entering a very Americanized political, situation now, where it is media being challenged more, whether it's media on the left or media on the right, dressed up as independent and impartial journalism. We are seeing more money coming into politics, whether it's for reform, whether it's through to the Labour Party actually as well, and the Tories. People might not be worried so much about where the money comes from. They just want their politicians and their parties to get the job done.
We're going to hear from Starmer and Badenoch in just a second. We do have the rather strange scenario that this battle in Clacton-on-Sea is likely to happen between two men, Nigel Paul Farage, leader of Reform UK, and Count Binface. Does that make a mockery of our democracy? Could that be embarrassing for Farage?
There's potential for it to be, because when you report on a by-election, you've got to probably consider all the candidates.
I mean, Christian, are we allowed to be pro-Binface or not? How neutral have I got to be here? All right. Now, Christian's spoken to me in a very legalistic tone, very cautious about Binface. The reason why I'm quite Binface adjacent is I think if he wins Clacton-on-Sea, then the bins will be collected on a weekly basis.
Well,
it's the one policy that you can expect. He'll get that taken care of.
And he
probably, I reckon he'll get rid of the separating the items, the recycling and all that. I reckon Binface, just one bin. Yeah. It's a one bin policy.
Yes, yeah.
Nigel, stop the boats. Binface, one bin.
But you
God, I'd vote for that. Joking apart.
Well, yes, yeah. You can't be blamed for that. But it is going to be.
That will be used against him, won't it? And Christian's just put an image on the screen of Farage and Binface as the two faces of this competition. Is there a danger that Nigel becomes a figure of mockery as a result of this?
Potentially. And, reporters will have to say, it depends how good a campaigner Count Binface is to see whether whether he can galvanise headlines, whether people actually take him seriously or think this is just a bit odd. And when I say take him seriously, I mean start listening to him if he's, if he can come out with some of the most, hilarious things that might galvanise the country.
What if Binface does a number on Farage? I'll tell you where Binface should be running is Birmingham.
Quite right.
Yeah. And he would become the mayor of Birmingham, wouldn't he? Has Birmingham got a mayor? It does, of course.
The West Midlands, yes.
The West Midlands, formerly Andy Street, of course. By the way, the other big debate coming, we're going to hear from Starmer and Badenoch in just a second. A very ugly debate that's playing out on the show. And when you want to thank your neighbour for something or gift your partner, what do? Do you go for the roses, the celebrations? Do you go for the Cadbury's Heroes, or do you go for Quality Street? How can I have forgotten Quality Street? Well, the messages are coming in thick and fast. Anne in Nottingham says, don't forget the amazing M&S Big One chocolates. They are just divine. She also adds that money that Nigel received is not taxpayers' money, so it's none of our business. Great show, as always. Cliff in Berkshire. Mark and Charlie, personally, I like Quality Street. My all-time favourite is no longer made, and that was Maynard's chocolate-covered coconut ice. Cliff, I normally agree with you, but we're going to have to part company on the coconut, the bounty. Thanks, but no thanks. How about Sir Keir Starmer on Nigel Farage's resignation?
This is a desperate stunt from Nigel Farage, and it's obvious why he's doing it. He is up to his neck in sleaze. Politics should be about improving the lives of millions of people, not about personal gain, not about hiding dodgy donations. And I think the public will see this for exactly what it is.
Well, Starmer striking a very firm tone there. What about the leader of the Conservatives, Kemi Badenoch?
Nigel Farage is having a hissy fit because the first time he's actually having to deal with some real scrutiny. What he needs to do is be honest about where his fishy £5 million came from, rather than calling a fake by-election to run away from a standards investigation. We will be standing a candidate in the real by-election because no one is above Parliament. Parliament is bigger than all of us. We all have to follow the same rules. We all have to register our interests. What this by-election is a gimmick. This is him wanting to make everything about himself rather than his offer to the country at a time when we have a defence crisis, a retiring Prime Minister, so much change and turbulence. Conservative Party is the only party that's actually focused on the issues that matter to people.
I've got to say that Kemi Badenoch has definitely found her feet as a politician, because if you listen to those two responses from the Prime Minister, the usual robotic performance, Britain's first AI-generated premier, the human manifestation of ChatGPT gone horribly wrong. Oh, Nigel Farage this, Nigel Farage that, demonstrating exactly why he's about to leave Number 10. I will say, Kemi hit a few great lines there, didn't she? She used the word gimmick, she used the expression hissy fit, and fishy $5 million.
That's
how you do politics.
It is. I mean, they are strong words, but she's a strong woman.
And it trips off the tongue and it stays in your head.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think fishy $5 million is particularly strong.
Yes,
because there's a little bit of levity there. There's a touch of humour to it, which I think actually then lands the message better.
Absolutely, yeah. And there's a bit of alliteration. So she knows what she's doing. Look, she is doing better in the polls. The party, is right behind her. She's speaking her mind. She's got no shackles on her. There's no holds barred, because she's trying to clean up the Tory party and apologise for its mistakes, but is moving it forward. Apologised for the mistakes, but now trying to get to grips with the real issues and doing politics a little bit different. She is talking tough and she's being honest and she's speaking hard truths.
And I think the expression fishy $5 million is something that's going to be repeated now a lot. And here's my next question for you. Notwithstanding this rather exciting drama that's playing out in the second by-election in Clacton-on-Sea, in regard to the sort of Farage brand, where does this leave him, do you think? Because some people think that, this is going to look indulgent, that he's doing this, and could harm him.
I mean, potentially. I mean, we won't know. I mean,
it's all about Nigel. We've got the boats, we've got inflation, we've got an economy that doesn't live within its means, and then here we go with Nigel. It's all about him again.
But that's where he excels, I think, particularly amongst his base. He is better as a campaigner, clearly. He likes the limelight. He likes to be able to set out his views. He likes to do big speeches, mass rallies, where he's engaging with an audience, where he's telling the public exactly what he thinks and getting the applause for it. So there'll be lots of people around the country who think that this is a great move and think that, well done and fair play.
Is there a danger it will look indulgent? Because it is indulgent, isn't it?
Well, it is. But I think if you're not already a supporter of Nigel, then you'll probably take that view. I don't think this will sway you either way. I think this is just to sort of shore up the support and remind people that why, as he'll see it, that they are ahead in the polls. Why have reform topped the last 300 opinion polls? It's because of Nigel. It's not because of necessarily anyone else in reform. And that's the challenge reform still have. If Nigel goes, then of course they won't be in the quite a comfortable position, I don't think. So he is the front man. He is the main man, and he's, I think, just after a few weeks of having to deal with some of these questions, I think he feels as though he set it all out yesterday. He's now having a by-election. to reaffirm his authority as the Member of Parliament for Clacton and to seize control of the narrative. When you've got a new incoming Labour Prime Minister, Nigel will still be the talk of the town versus Andy Burnham.
Well, there's no better man to have in the studio on any occasion, and particularly this morning, Charlie, because you're a former Conservative Special Advisor, and I've been looking at the various constituencies that Nigel and Reform need to sort of bring into the Reform umbrella to form an overall majority at the next election. They need working class former Labour supporters, the so-called Red Wall, many of whom lent Boris Johnson their vote in 2019. The patriotic, common sense, anti-woke, ex-Labour voters who supported Brexit. Well, I think he's got those in the bag. And I don't think they care about the 5 million or Posh George or anything else. They care about their country, and it's priced in that Nigel does too. So I think that he's going to capture the Red Wall, the working class votes. He's also going to capture Conservative voters, as in small c, right-wing voters. But what about those One Nation sort of Lib Demi type Conservative voters? Will this sort of drama, this pantomime in Clacton-on-Sea, scare them away?
Well, I don't think they'd appreciate it.
It's Middle England. There are millions of them.
Yeah.
And they all vote. And they are Conservatives, but they're suspicious of Nigel.
Yeah, and I think they would probably be on the side of, you know, why didn't he declare, you know, 5 million is not just a gift, particularly when, well, as they would see it, particularly when I think, you know, a few months ago, it might have been even last year, you know, Reform announced a cryptocurrency sort of policy that they would. So there is a you could draw a link, some might say.
Yeah.
But, you know, but how far is just your own sort of working versus...
I think this is, and I'm going to ask Zia Yusuf about this at 9 a.m. It's moderate Conservative voters are going to be a hard nut to crack for Reform UK.
Yeah.
I think if they capture that group, they're home and host. But I think they might look at yesterday and just think, well, this is a pantomime.
Yes, yeah. But those voters also might think and recognise that, OK, there are so many things that are broken in this country that need to be fixed. Actually, OK, we might not like Nigel, we might not be his go-to base, but at least he's actually sort of, you know, checking the system, he's actually testing the system.
So
he
would it be a bit like the old school Republicans who voted for Trump in 2024, thinking, look, this is not really our guy, but if the alternative is calmer,
and
where
exactly.
do I sign?
And that will be the choice, I think. Well, as currently things stand, that will be the choice at the next election. Is it a leader of a party that can test Parliament to the point of you know, to try and reset it, to make it work for the people of this country, that's taken on the media, that's taken on the establishment, that's won, in his view, versus the same old Labour Party with higher taxes, higher borrowing, higher spending and higher debt? That will be the choice at the next election. So whether you don't like Nigel, you can't fault him for all the things that he's done in public life. You might just hold your nose and vote for him rather than anything else.
I like this from Frank in Bingley in West Yorkshire. Good morning, Mark and Charlie. The establishment think that a Clacton by-election is a farce, so much so that they want an inquiry so they can force a by-election in Clacton. Work that one out. Brilliant. What an excellent point. Keep those messages coming. Here's a voice note on the very subject of Nigel Farage.
Morning, Mark. Morning, Charlie. Charlie and George on their way to work again to pay that £40 billion welfare bill. Off we go. Regarding Nigel Farage and the £5 million, if it's £5 million or a pair of glasses or a new suit or a dress for your wife, all politicians are guilty of backhanders. Whether it's a backhander of £5 million or a backhander for a dress for your wife or glasses, like I say. It's all right if they do it, but if Nigel does it, it's front page news. Go on, Nigel, go for your by-election. Show these people what we're all about. Unfortunately, the press seem to choose and elect who runs our country the last couple of years, and that's why we're in the mess we're in.
The thing that most makes me angry about Keir Starmer talking about the need to defend our country, and he's gone out of his way to not make the tough decisions, to actually do the thing to defend our nation. It's cowardly, and I think it's treacherous.
Nothing to say on immigration, nothing to say on benefits, nothing to say on jobs, nothing to say on tax. Absolutely appalling. If this is the solution the country's been waiting for, then we are in a very, very bad place.
People up and down the country are asking why they are always being put second. They work every day, they get up, they pay their bills, they look after their kids, and yet the other side of the social contract is not being held.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk. Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Top of the morning, 2 minutes past 7. Mark Dolan in for the brilliant Jeremy Kyle. And breaking as we come on air, if I win, you win. It is the biggest stunt in British political history. But will Nigel Farage's great gamble pay off? With the other main parties not running a candidate, will a by-election victory in Clacton-on-Sea be legitimate? I'll be asking Reform UK's Shadow Home Secretary Zia Yusuf at 9 a.m. Meanwhile, the Reform leader frames this contest as the people versus the system. So will it work? Well, we'll be hearing from voices across the political spectrum. Can Nigel Farage bring down the establishment? It's all about your opinions. My phone number is 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK and your message to 87222. And we know you're busy on a Wednesday morning. If so, leave us a voice note and let's talk. And the big question this morning is a simple one, and I need you to answer it. Will Nigel have the last laugh? 0344 499 1000. Lots to get through, and it was a seismic political event yesterday, and some of the most experienced political journalists in the country did not know what was going to happen at 2 p.m. when Nigel went on X and said, I'll be talking about my future in public life. Some thought he would resign altogether. Well, that wasn't to be the case. Let's take a listen to Farage announcing his resignation as an MP.
I've thought about it hard, and I've decided today I will resign as a Member of Parliament for Clacton-on-Sea, thereby forcing a by-election, which should happen, I hope, in short order. No, I've decided that the people of Clacton should be the judges of my actions. This will be a people versus the establishment by-election. It's a chance to stick two fingers up to the entire establishment, to frankly tell them where to go. And that is why I will be putting my name forward to stand in this by-election. I will fight to win. I will fight to continue the political revolution that Reform has started. And I would say this to you, the voters of Clacton: if I win, you win. Because if I lose, they win. And we will never, with the two old parties, get the type of fundamental change that we need to fix broken Britain.
Nigel Evans is a very good friend of mine. He's the former Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons. He's out of Parliament now, which means he can be honest. Good morning, Nigel.
Good morning. How are you?
Very well, and I'd like to salute your very fetching blazer this morning. Nearly as elegant and sartorial as Farage himself.
I know. Actually, I was with Nigel Farage on Friday in Washington at some party, and I was wearing this blazer. He was wearing his iconic yellow blazer. So two Nigels wearing blazers.
Whilst we're on that, Nigel, I'm glad you mentioned the trip to the US. What is the latest status of Mr. Farage's relationship with the White House? Because it feels that he'd fell out of favour for a while.
Yeah, that's the stories that I've heard too. And I don't know what the reason is behind it, but it did seem as if him and Donald Trump had fallen out. But as we know, Donald Trump has tweeted that he is a big supporter of Nigel Farage's recently, and he believes that just like Nigel, that the relentless investigation into his monetary affairs is something like what Donald Trump has faced in the United States of America. So Donald Trump does seem to have some sympathy with where Nigel Farage finds himself.
Well, our TV director, Nahar, is putting out footage of Nigel Farage at a Trump rally before the election. And it's interesting because clearly what we're seeing here from Nigel Farage with this announcement yesterday is Trumpism in action, casting himself as the anti-establishment candidate.
Yeah, he has done that. And right, where I think that his statement yesterday was important was where he exposed the constant attacks that he's under, both physical and in other ways, which was very worrying. He instanced something where about 50 people turned on him when he was in his vehicle, and the car became a write-off. That was breaking news for me, because I didn't know about that. We all know about the milkshake, and we know that he's had to employ his own private security because for whatever reason, the police themselves won't ensure that he's got the security that he needs. I do believe that he is probably the most exposed politician in the United Kingdom. He comes under more attacks from activists than I believe any other politician. And I know that some, let's just say, former mainstream media journalists, Mark, have sneered at Nigel Farage, saying, but hold on, we've had 2 politicians that have been murdered. But this isn't the same case.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Lewis Goodall, who is the host or one of the hosts of the News Agents, citing 2 MPs whose lives were taken, somewhat missing the point that Farage's threats are very active.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought actually it was a despicable, sneering point that Lewis Goodall made. And quite frankly, there has to be a realization that Nigel Farage is a bit Marmite, and there are people out there who do not like him, and a small number of them will take it to an extent which is totally unacceptable. And so I think the security around Nigel Farage does properly need to be looked at. Putting that to one side, though, Mark, I do feel that Nigel Farage himself has missed the point. The reality is that he has been given a substantial donation by this crypto guy. I look at his name up, Chris Harborne. I don't know anything about this man other than he's a very, very rich person, and he's given a £5 million personal donation to Nigel Farage. And then there's another chap called George Cottrell, who himself has donated sufficient funds to provide staff for Nigel and an accommodation not far from Buckingham Palace. Now, the rules of the House of Commons have changed since I was there, and it means that anybody who is elected in 2024 has to look at the 12 months prior to them being elected and look at any donations above the figure of £300, and they then need to register that. And if Nigel had only done that, and in my own view, right, and I'm a layman, it's now being looked at by the commissioner, then I think that had he just made the registration, there wouldn't be the fuss that there currently is. Now, if Nigel thinks that by holding this by-election, which, as you know, all the major parties are now not going to take part in, is going to stop that investigation, well, the answer is it may pause it for the period of the by-election. But as we saw with Boris Johnson, when Boris Johnson resigned as a member of parliament, the investigation into him continued. And then they reported a week after he had resigned as a member of parliament. So the investigation cannot properly be stopped. And I think that it is something that we should now wait for the commissioner to do his investigation and work out whether Nigel Farage should have registered those amounts of money or not. I mean, that's something I think is quite legitimate. And I also believe where Nigel has got it wrong is to say that anybody, like any journalist asking legitimate questions about the £5 million, this is a substantial sum of money, don't forget. I think that journalists should have a right to ask questions about that £5 million, just as journalists should have a right to ask about Angela Rayner's property portfolio and whether she should have paid tax on the second home that she had. I think it's absolutely right that journalists should ask about Louise Haigh and the missing telephone, about Tulip Siddiq. There's a new member of the Scottish Parliament from the Green Party, Mark, I don't know if you know, but he was claiming poverty the other day, and journalists found out that he owns a £250,000 property in India.
In India, correct. Yeah.
So all of these questions are legitimate, and Andy Burnham himself now, when he was just mayor of Manchester, I don't think the scrutiny that he got there is anything like the scrutiny he's just about to face. And he himself has been asked questions about some property in Dolphin Square when he was a member of Parliament, where he received some money which, instead of giving it back to the authorities, which he may have been able to do, he decided to buy another property with it. You know, these are all legitimate questions that people like Andy Burnham now has to answer. So what I would say to Nigel is that I think he has misjudged the situation, calling this by-election and then contesting it himself. It's not going to really prove anything too much. I know he is fairly popular in Clacton, and the fact that none of the major parties, I think Count Binface is the only candidate who is not going to be standing against him. So, you know, in those circumstances, I would expect Nigel Farage to win. But it's not, the questions aren't going to go away, Mark. It's as simple as that.
No, most definitely. So you've spent time with Farage. Briefly, if you can, Nigel, did he look rattled, and did he say anything to you about whether he did make a mistake not declaring the $5 million? Do you think if he had his time again, he would?
Well, I did ask him. I said, it's a bit relentless, isn't it, Nigel? And he said, well, yeah, you know, you're taking several blows to the body. After a while, it's going to hurt. But I think the thing that that really has triggered his anger is the Sky News team turning up outside his daughter's home. And I think that that is something that he feels to be completely wrong, as he said in his statement yesterday, that he's never used his daughter in any of his campaigning, and so she's outside of politics. And is it fair for any journalists to start knocking on her door or start to intimidate her? No, absolutely. I think that that is completely wrong. But I do believe that journalists have a legitimate right to ask Nigel about his affairs. Yeah, on Friday, he did look a bit tired, I've got to say. I wasn't expecting the announcement that did come, but I think it was the intimidation of his daughter and the hounding of his daughter that has now pushed him over the top.
Well, I thought it was a very interesting encounter with Sky News on his return to the United Kingdom, having visited America for their 250th anniversary celebrations. He looked exhausted, and he was quite firm with that journalist, and I thought it could have been potentially a Richard Nixon moment for him. Nixon, famously in the US presidential election in the 1960s, appeared on TV with a 5 o'clock shadow, and a fresh-faced JFK came across better. And this clearly is an effort by Nigel Farage to get away from this story and to seize the narrative. Well, you mentioned his anger about the behaviour and actions of Sky News, who he claims have harassed his daughter. Let's take a listen to Robert Jenrick, who's the Shadow Chancellor, versus Adam Bolton on Sky News. Take a listen.
I think it's perfectly legitimate for journalists to make inquiries.
Adam, so here we are. You're saying that it's perfectly legitimate for Sky News to hound the daughter of Nigel Farage.
No,
oh my God!
Hang on, wait a minute.
What planet
we're not talking about hounding, and we're not talking about banging on the door. Both of which are distortions of the truth. Before you make false assertions about what happened,
nothing I've said is false.
I think that
it was Sky News.
You're asking me a question.
Sky News initially denied this when it was 100%
I am saying that journalists.
How can anyone trust this channel when you lied about
journalists are entirely entitled to make inquiries. It's not against against the law.
Kids?
It is not against the law. How old is Nigel Farage's daughter? I don't think she's a kid.
Of their children? You think it's perfectly legitimate?
Let's lower the tone. The point of the matter is that...
Sky News has lowered the tone.
Please, let me just say...
Sky News has lowered the tone. What a zinger. Well, Nigel, we have a response from Sky News in regard to Mr. Farage's allegations that the news network harassed his daughter. And here's the following post on X. Clarification, Sky News was not at the property at 7:41 a.m, as has already been acknowledged and as shown in the footage from 10:19 a.m. Sky News was outside a property where Mr. Farage was registered to vote at the last election. Sky News did not interact with Mr. Farage's daughter. What do you make of this drama, Nigel? Could it be damaging to Sky News?
Well, they've made their case, and it's up now to Nigel Farage to contest what has been said. I mean, it's fairly interesting, I have to say, to hear Robert Jenrick defending it in the way that he has. I mean, you're right, it's a ding-dong. That's classic TV. That will be looked at in decades to come, that confrontation between Adam Bolton and Jenrick. Do you know, if there should be any by-elections, Mark, I'm going to say this, I've got to say it, then it should have been Robert Jenrick and Danny Kruger and Suella Braverman, Andrew Rosendale. These are former Tories who have defected to the Reform Party. Their electors did not vote for them as Reform candidates. They voted for them as Conservatives. And so if there should be any by-elections in the country, it should be in those seats, not in Nigel Farage's. But listen, this argument as to his daughter's property is clearly going to go on. Sky did, by the looks of it, have a camera crew there, and maybe, the daughter is going to feel intimidated. It's as simple as that when you've got a camera crew. This isn't something that normally happens to ordinary people. And we know that, Nigel Farage is not an ordinary person. He is a public person. But Nigel Farage's daughter isn't. And I think that there is a line, and it shouldn't be crossed. And I think the big question mark is, has Sky News crossed that mark?
Briefly, Nigel, is it an insult to the voters of Clapham to use them in this way, Clacton, as a way of, don't worry about, good luck winning in Clapham, Nigel, which is a very sort of woke middle-class area. Nigel, back to this. Clacton-on-Sea, is it an insult to the people of Clacton-on-Sea that they're being used as a political football?
Well, as I said, I think it's a big misjudgment. If Nigel hasn't already sought through the Chancellor of the Exchequer to get one of these two posts, the Chiltern Hundreds is one of them, famously, Mark. So I don't know whether he's already resigned or not. But he can see that this would be a Pyrrhic victory if he was to go ahead, because none of the major political parties are going to contest it. Then my own view is he shouldn't resign. He just allow the Commissioner to go through the investigations, and if the investigation finds against him, then find out what the penalty
But Nigel, why does he have to declare the 5 million? It was a gift, and ultimately it will be Farage's word against those of the authorities.
Yeah, the Commissioner has got to work out whether he believes that 5 million...
They can't work it out unless they're mind readers. It's his word against theirs.
Yeah, but it's got to be a judgment as to whether the £5 million was
a judgment. That's inference. That's what did for Prince Harry yesterday in the High Court, and he lost.
No, Mark, there are processes there that are going to be followed. As I said, any member of Parliament could have an allegation put against...
Processes sounds like a stitch-up to me. It's going to be someone's opinion that this was not a gift. That's not due process, Nigel. This sort of process, Mark, wasn't there when I was a member of Parliament, but I did sit down in Strasbourg a month ago with a Labour MP, and I said, tell me, what was your induction like? And she told me that she was told that in no uncertain terms that if she had been given anything above the value of £300, then she should err on the side of caution and register that sum of money. Now, if Nigel had just done that, and indeed, even Mark, if he'd said, listen, I thought this was a personal gift, I didn't think it had anything to do with the fact that I was a politician. It was somebody who is a crypto millionaire
a billionaire indeed, who decided that he just wanted to give me £5 million. I mean, this is not an ordinary day thing, Mark. You've got to admit it. Even Nigel himself refers to it as a lottery win. Would you think that it's right for you to register it? And if he's made a mistake, he should say, listen, I've made a mistake. And it may well be that the commissioner then says, well, fine, and just accepts that. And the other thing as well, Mark, is there's 649 other MPs. They will have all been told the same thing in their induction. Now, some of them may be thinking long and hard about whether there are things out there that they have not registered that they should do.
No, Nigel, definitely. With the clock against us, I'm very interested. But you've got the experience, former Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons, and I hear everything you're saying. I suspect if Nigel had his time again, he would have declared the money. But will it be more difficult for the parliamentary authorities to provoke yet another by-election? Has Nigel yesterday cleverly set a bear trap where if he's found to have flouted the rules, they won't ban him for 10 days and cause a by-election because of what's happened yesterday?
Well, of course, what could happen, Mark, and the people call it a double by-election. So let's say we go through this process of a by-election and Nigel Farage beats Count Binface, and then the commissioner sometime in September then declares that there's been a huge problem, and then there's a recommendation from the committee within Parliament that he is suspended for longer than 10 days. There may not necessarily be a recall, because, of course, it does take the constituents of Nigel Farage to write in, I can't remember how many thousand it is, Mark, but they are the ones who could trigger the recall. And if you recall, Ian Paisley is the only member of Parliament where there was the possibility of a recall, but there weren't sufficient signatures from his constituents, so a recall never happened. And so in Nigel Farage's case, it may well be that the good folk of Clacton decide in the end that if it does go against Nigel, that they've had enough of by-elections, thanks very much, and they're not going to write in and say that he should be recalled. It's a fascinating time. We're living in an era that I've never seen the likes of this ever in my political career.
Well, you're absolutely right, Nigel. I think the figure is roughly 10% of the registered electorate, and I do think Nigel has created a bear trap. What a fantastic and fascinating conversation. Nigel, we look forward to catching up really soon. Thank you for your valuable time this morning. Nigel Evans, former Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons. Here's a voice note from Kevin.
Morning, Mark. Kevin in Sheffield. Regarding Nigel Farage triggering a by-election yesterday, I did find it very strange and, quite honestly, a bit suspicious that one after the other, every other party kept saying, no, we're not getting involved in this by-election. It's very much what we talk about every day. There seems to be a uni-party consensus that they're all going to do one thing because Reform want to change things and they just don't like it. It'll be also very interesting to see how the media cover this. I know Talk and another media outlet will definitely cover it and cover it very thoroughly. But I'm getting the impression that a lot of the mainstream media are just going to brush over this as though it's not happening at all.
And we won't be doing that. I'm delighted to say live at 9 on Talk Breakfast is Zia Yusuf, the Shadow Home Secretary for Reform UK. Will Nigel have the last laugh? It is 7:25.
The Crown is facing.
We've got some breaking news that has just come in. TalkSport have announced a brand new partnership in a developing story. We hear they've created So Good Lager right in time for football's big summer. Just in, we're hearing that So Good Lager will be pouring pints across all O'Neill's pubs and some of the best sports pubs across the UK. With the big kickoff just around the corner, you can find out where to get your hands on a fresh pint of So Good Lager at talksport.com/lager.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
$7:27, this is Talk Breakfast. Mark Dolan in for the brilliant Jeremy Kyle, who returns tomorrow. Zia Yusuf live on the show at 9 a.m. this morning. In just an hour and a half's time, you won't want to miss it. Zia Yusuf live at 9. And I'll be asking him, will Nigel have the last laugh? Well, you've responded on the texts. Helen says, good morning, Mark. Farage is the last laugh. A pathetic man. Proof of his guilt, if you ask me. Other parties will stand against him if something comes up in the investigation that they've said this. Farage also hated by Restore voters. It's embarrassing for Farage. Everyone, including the right, hate him. Lefties, let's get behind bin face and belittle fascism in all its glory. That would be the finger to the far right. Helen, thank you for that. It's all about opinions. Keep them coming. Here's a voice note from Sean.
Morning, Mark. Sean from Grimsby. Never been Farage's biggest fan. However, after yesterday, my estimation of the man went up a bit. You know, because he's right what he says. It isn't us versus them. On the one hand, you've got the Lib Dems, the Tories, the Greens, Labour, who don't want to do what we want them to do. They only want to do what they want to do. And on the other hand, you've got Farage, the only politician who seems to be listening and actually wants to do what we want him to do. And nobody else does. And what's the answer? The Tories, the Lib Dems and the Greens, oh, we're not going to run against him. Well, why not? If this man is such a fascist and a Nazi and a threat to democracy and a Putin lover and all these other things, why aren't you going to show the good people of Clacton, right, to vote for someone decent, apparently? I'll tell you why, Mark, because the rest of them are all cowards. They're only in it for themselves, mate. Great show, Mark.
Top man, Sean, thank you for the kind words and for the brilliant voice note. Keep them coming. Meanwhile, the geopolitical situation remains very fragile. US forces have launched powerful retaliatory strikes against Iran in a fresh blow to peace talks after the regime brazenly shot at ships in the Strait of Hormuz. Meanwhile, the US President Donald Trump has threatened to pull US troops out of Europe as he renewed his demand to take control of Greenland. Let's get reaction from Professor Gwydion Prinz, who is a former advisor to the Ministry of Defence, NATO and the United Nations. Good morning, Prof.
Morning.
Thank you very much for joining us. How unstable is the situation in the Middle East at the moment and that Strait of Hormuz?
It's a stable instability, Mark. That's not really a paradox. If you understand what is actually happening here, and the first thing to understand is that there is no negotiation, there never was. There cannot be. The purpose of the negotiation, so-called, I believe, is part of the general plan, which you and I have talked about in the past. The general plan is to produce a circumstance in which the people of Persia can take back Persia. In other words, the end of this Shia theocracy. Now, you can't do that with bombs. You can't do that with people's feet on the ground, American soldiers. It can only be done by the people themselves, but you have to prepare the context. And if you look at what's happened since the so-called negotiations have happened, we've seen the leadership of the theocracy split three ways. It's split between the clerics, who used to be absolutely dominant, and who are now led by Mojibba Khamenei, who nobody has ever seen, the son of the Khamenei who was killed on 28th of Feb. Secondly, the IRGC, And then thirdly, the group who are principally represented by the Speaker of the House, Farage, and the Deputy President, I think he is, Pezekian, who were being abused and yelled at and had to escape from the funeral of Khamenei yesterday because the hardline mourners were saying that they had brought disgrace on Iran by even talking to the great Satan. So what's happening is that the whole business of this so-called memorandum of understanding, just read the thing. The 16 points are completely incompatible with any strategic interest of the United States. If the United States accepted them, it's essentially accepting a surrender to seizing defeat from the jaws of victory. So see it as part of the general war. It's Clausewitz talking about diplomacy being war by other means.
And how do you see this playing out? Because it matters to my viewers and listeners, doesn't it, Professor, given the fact that access to the Strait of Hormuz has big implications for energy supplies into the West and the world economy?
Yeah, of course it does. And what hasn't been, at least not in my observation, much reported in the mainstream media is a fact which 2 seconds of reflection would tell you must be the case. And that is that the Straits of Hormuz are not controlled by the IRGC. The opening and the closing of the blockade is in the hands of the world's most powerful navy, the United States Navy. And the United States Navy has been escorting large numbers of ships through, but, and I've talked to shipping people about this, the arrangements for it are kept quite quiet. The convoys go through. The insurance is put in place with a federal guarantee from the American government through American insurers. And the terms are that you don't talk about the fact that you've got the insurance and that you're going through.
Well, it's fascinating. Briefly, if you can, Professor, how do you see this playing out? Could this issue, I mean, you've mentioned really it's not a negotiation, and I take that point, but could we get back to where we were at the start of the year by Christmas?
That's a misframing of the question, Mark. We are far, far advanced from where we were at the beginning of the year. The amount of physical and human destruction, and I'm sorry to be clinical about this, but the killing, the targeted killing of the leadership has been extraordinarily precise and has been devastating. So whilst the extravagant rhetoric of Mr. Trump, which sticks in most people's craw, including mine, I think is not helpful, although I understand why he does it. The fact of the matter is that the Iranian regime is vastly weakened from the position that it was originally in. But it still is in a position to do what it did last night, which is to strike the Gulf states and to try and strike American bases, although not successfully. Look at the reports from CENTCOM. Look at what Admiral Brad Cooper, the quiet admiral who is actually running this whole operation, said over the last couple of days. He is not a man who uses extravagant language, but it's quite clear that he has what they call in the trade escalation dominance here.
Professor, always a privilege to have you on the show. This conversation will continue. I wish we had longer, but for now, Professor Gwydion Prince, very clear that Iran is massively enfeebled. And I've got to say that notwithstanding the challenges around the execution of this war, clearly it's the most wicked regime since the Nazis, if we're honest. We know that Iran are the biggest sponsors of global terrorism, and therefore to deal with this regime, I think, is the right thing to do. And possibly Donald Trump will be judged rather more favourably by history than he is by establishment media as we speak. Gwydion Prince is a former advisor to the Ministry of Defence, NATO and the United Nations. Will Nigel Farage have the last laugh? Here's a voice note from Steve.
Nigel Farage, I'm a Reform supporter, I'm a Reform member, and I'm not sure what he's doing, what he's saying. Because if this is, you know, the final straw is what's happened with his daughter and people turning up at her house or his house, you know, if he's going to then, you know, resign and then have a by-election and then come back into politics, the same is going to happen again. I don't understand what he's trying to, you know, what his end goal is. I think it's all just a show, to be honest. And all he's doing is actually giving more votes, in my opinion, to restore. So it's not helping his situation or reforms.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Talk Breakfast. Mark Dolan in for Jeremy Kyle, who returns tomorrow. Zia Yusuf, Reform UK's Home Affairs spokesperson, is live at 9 a.m. on the show. Natasha has messaged Talk Breakfast. Hi, Mark. If we're going to discuss whether Nigel Farage is using the people of Clacton for his own ends, what about Burnham and the people of Makerfield? Funny, not much fuss by the establishment about that one. Natasha, thank you for that. Keep your opinions coming. We're joined now by Michael Crick, author of One Party After Another, The Disruptive Life of Nigel Farage. Michael Crick, of course, is also a TV news legend. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning.
It's been too long. Brilliant to have you back on the show. Did you see this coming yesterday when Nigel announced on X that he was going to talk about his future in public life? Did you anticipate this outcome?
No, I thought possibly he was actually going to give up public life, because there's been a lot of talk about that recently. He's not looked well. Some people have been saying he's ill, and he's clearly fed up with things, and he's fed up with all this questioning about the Harborne donation, now the questioning about Posh George's George Cotton gifts in kind, and he's fed up with the way in which he's been outflanked on the right by Rupert Lowe and the Restore Party, who are doing extremely well. Now, this by-election is completely bogus. If he'd allowed the parliamentary commissioner to carry on with his investigation, he either would have been acquitted, or he would have been found guilty of breaching parliamentary rules. And if that had been considered serious enough, and then it probably would have led to a by-election anyway. Instead of which, we've got a by-election where Farage is up against Count Binface and the monster raving loony party, because all the serious parties have opted out. But actually, what's more serious than that this week is that we've seen the new snarling, aggressive, bullying side of Nigel Farage that many people in UKIP, his old party, and in his Reform Party have regularly seen at close hands. The people that have been purged by Farage over the years. To the general public, and indeed to me largely, Farage comes across as a friendly, self-deprecating, good for a joke, good company, good for a pint. And we're now seeing there is another nasty side of Farage, which is adopted tactics from America, which are basically lies. A lot of yesterday was an argument about Sky News and accusations that Sky had intimidated his daughter, hounded them, banged on the door of their home. The evidence shows that that is just not true. And those lies were repeated by Farage's henchmen, Richard Tice and Zia Yusuf and Robert Jenrick, on broadcasters everywhere, and Layla Cunningham, in an extremely aggressive way, as we saw on Newsnight last night, where other people couldn't get a word in. If people tried to come back with truthful comments, they were shouted down by these people. It's a whole new development, this, based essentially on lies. And the whole thing about Nigel Farage's daughter, Isabelle, is just complete rubbish. And I said so last night, and of course, Richard Tice landed on me. And I'm saying it again today. What evidence have you got that Sky hounded Isabelle Farage? What evidence have you got that they intimidated Isabelle Farage? You're showing a picture on your screen now of somebody walking up to the door, and quite reasonably, what, according to Sky, and I believe them, they maybe the word is possibly knocked on the door, possibly rang the doorbell, not banged on the door. And the purpose of that was to try and see if Nigel Farage was at home, because that is the house that Nigel Farage was registered to vote at the last general election. It was difficult to find Farage over the weekend. Sky weren't clear, I think, whether he was in this country or still coming back from America. Perfectly reasonable to go and knock on somebody's door or ring their doorbell to try and find them. According to Sky, they had no interaction at all with Isabelle Farage. Now, if Farage and Tice and Zia Yusuf and Layla Cunningham and Robert Jenrick have evidence to the contrary, they should produce that evidence now, and I will withdraw what I've said. But for the time being, I think Sky have got it right on this, and Farage and his cronies have been telling a bunch of lies. That is now their political tactic, like Donald Trump.
Now, Michael, there's a debate to be had about whether Farage has overcooked his concerns about Sky News' actions. But we do know that they were outside this property where Mr. Farage was registered to vote at the last election. I take that point. However, it was very well reported that Nigel was out of the country at the time, and the person at the property was his daughter. And Nigel Farage, notwithstanding what I thought was quite an unedifying short interview with Sky News reporters on his return to the UK at the airport, that anger was genuine.
Well, it may have been genuine. It may have been cooked up. But the fact is that they didn't. Where does that Sky appears to have had no interaction with his daughter. Has he produced? Where's the statement from his daughter?
It's my understanding that an individual from Sky News approached the property, rang the doorbell, as you say, or knocked on the door without a camera crew. But this happened, you know, and therefore, to the letter of the law, Sky News approached Nigel Farage's daughter at home.
Well, they didn't.
So why have you gone into bat for Sky News? Are you on the payroll, Michael?
I think that decent
have they slipped you a few quid?
I think it's our duty. No, they haven't slipped.
It's not our duty to take sides, Michael. I ought to think a journalist of your calibre should reserve judgment until you have all the facts.
It's our duty to look at the evidence, right?
We don't have all of the evidence.
Where is the evidence, Mark, that Sky intimidated Isabelle Farage? Where's the evidence? Come on, show it me.
That is something that I've raised a question mark about. I've said that Nigel may have overcooked the alleged harassment. And I agree with you. I agree with you about Jenrick and others. Spare me the pearl clutching. I understand. And journalists like yourself, and you're the best at what you do, will doorstop people. It is journalistic procedure. But that said, Sky have clearly sent an individual to ring that doorbell to approach a property inhabited by someone's daughter that has never been in the political arena.
Well, it may well have been that Sky thought, right, we've got to find Farage. Difficult to find him at the moment. He has all these.
Did they not know he was in the United States as a British news gathering organisation?
There may have been a misunderstanding, but hang on, Mark.
A misunderstanding?
What was the damage here, Mark? Somebody rings on a doorbell. They talk to somebody else who was not Farage's daughter. We don't know who it is. Perhaps it's her boyfriend or somebody staying there or whatever, and then they go away, right? What is the harm there? This is something you will have done as a journalist. I've certainly done as many times as a journalist. It is a perfectly reasonable thing to do. Instead of which, it has been boosted into this idea that it's been boosted into this allegation that Sky intimidated Isabelle Farage.
Well, there is no evidence of that, Michael.
Why doesn't Isabelle Farage come out with a statement? It's not, and people keep talking about
this poor woman who you keep name checking. I'd rather not. It's suddenly become this public figure,
well known
which
who
proves
she is.
it proves Nigel's point.
I'm a celebrity. Get me out of here. She's not a shrinking violet. And she's 20 years old, by the way. She is an adult. She isn't a child, as some people have been saying.
Well, I agree. I mean, that's misleading.
Guys right to it. And this idea that they've slipped me some money. You're better than that, Mark Dolan. You're a lot better than that.
Listen,
and you know it.
You know the levity with
and
which
if you
I
want to come round
this
here and
job.
look at my bank accounts, come round.
And you'll obviously share all of your details with the parliamentary authorities if you become an MP. Look, Michael, the bottom line is that there is, a lot of agreement between us. I think that Reform UK are guilty of pearl clutching on this one. I'm also a bit concerned at the idea that news organisations should be prohibited from so-called doorstepping, which is an important part of their job and something that you've done with distinction for many years, which is why I introduced you as a TV news legend. But I don't know, Michael, why you're going into bat for Sky News in regard to their approach to a property when Nigel was very publicly in the United States being photographed with the Vice President, no less.
In actual fact, I think
smell a rat.
At the time in question, he wasn't in the United States. He was on the way home. But I don't know the answer to that.
You're clutching at straws, Michael. You're better than that. Don't worry about me.
Hang on a moment. You've just described those scenes as doorstepping.
You used to be so surgical.
So did you. Now, don't start acting like that lot. Now, Mark, you and I used to be good friends. I used to get on with you.
We still are, I hope, Michael. We still are. I'm your number one fan.
The picture you've got here is not somebody doorstepping. It is somebody. Doorstepping involves somebody with a microphone or a notebook and a camera. There isn't a camera in this scene here, taken presumably from Farage. The video on Farage's on the house. I say Farage's house because I think it is still owned by him. It is somebody going up to the door to see whether he's there, right? That is not doorstepping, certainly not hounding, it's certainly not intimidation.
But, Michael, what I find stretches credibility is that a news organisation like Sky News should be unaware that Mr Farage was out of the country.
Well, maybe they didn't know whether he'd come back or not, whether he'd come back on an earlier plane and then gone back to his house in South London. Maybe they didn't know. I don't know, and I hope to find that.
But that is the grey area, and that's why I'm surprised, Michael. I'm surprised that you're being so partisan about this, because you and neither of us have all of the facts.
I plead guilty to being partisan in the interests of truth, right? I am a journalist who's interested in finding out what's going on.
And I respect that. And
you
Michael,
essentially are a propagandist.
Well, in what context am I a propagandist? I have agreed with you.
You're a propagandist because you see it as your role in life to change people's views. I see it as my view in life as a mainstream journalist to find out what's going on and find out why it's going on.
And therefore, why have you failed to do that on this occasion, Michael, when you're giving Sky News the benefit of the doubt that they didn't know Nigel was overseas?
Because I know how Farage
That's a favourable interpretation.
Farage uses the lie as a common form of currency. He's lied and lied and lied again throughout his political career. And so far, we have seen no evidence from even the evidence we have from Farage's house doesn't suggest hounding or intimidation.
And upon that, we can agree.
Right.
And I think that Robert Jenrick's expression on Sky News that, that the journalist approaching someone's kids is very misleading.
Using the word kids implies that they're under 18.
Well, it's dishonest. It's dishonest.
Yeah, Isabelle Farage will be 21 this
You're
October.
Obsessed with Isabelle Farage. Do we have to keep name-checking this lady? She's not a public figure.
No, but
Isabelle this, Isabelle that.
Well, it was actually Nigel Farage himself who told me what her name was many years ago, because I said my daughter was called, introduced him to my daughter, who's also called Isabelle. And I think this was on camera. And he said, oh, I've got a girl called Isabelle as well. And that was when they were both about 10. So, and she appeared on these I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. You remember when Farage came out of the jungle or whatever it is, his girlfriend, Law Ferrari, turned up along with his daughter, Isabelle.
Now, Michael, you and I don't need to fall out because you are the embodiment of journalism and you've been such an agent of truth for your whole career. And it's quite amazing. Some of the public figures that you've held to account across the political spectrum, you are the nemesis of anyone that's hypocritical, dishonest, devious or otherwise. What do you make, before we let you go, Michael, this is a massive stunt on the part of Nigel Farage. Will it backfire? What do you make of the politics of this?
Well, I mean, why would anybody go to the Clacton by-election? You know, no doubt everybody will go there once and have a laugh at Farage and Count Binface and the Monster Raving Loony Party, and no doubt there'll be a few individuals trying to get a bit of publicity for themselves. When David Davis did this 16 years ago in Holton, Price and Howden, there were 26 candidates, and the parties, most of the main parties boycotted that by-election, and among the people boycotting that by-election was UKIP, then led by Nigel Farage. So it'll fizzle out. There'll be nothing there, and some people will feel obliged to go and report it. But it'll be a two-day wonder. And frankly, there actually is rather more important news around today, because if he gets re-elected, which he will, there's quite a strong likelihood there'll be a second by-election later this year, and that will be the important by-election.
Well, there is one clear fact, which is that Michael Crick is a TV news legend. Michael, such a treat to have you on the show. Thank you for the heated discussion, and it was very informative, and I think there's a landing ground here whereby, yes, Reform have made essentially hay with this story, but on the other hand, I'm not sure that Sky are necessarily guilty of some egregious assault on the privacy of Nigel Farage's daughter. But what do you think? 03444991000. Michael Crick, author of One Party After Another, The Disruptive Life of Nigel Farage. You see, that's what this show is about. It's all about opinions. And as a host here on Talk, I don't just welcome people that disagree with me. I love it. Speaking of which, Joe Twyman is the founder of Delta Poll, and he's going to crunch the numbers. Good morning, Joe.
Good morning, Mark.
Do I need to get over to William Hill or Paddy Power and put my bet on Nigel Paul Farage winning the Clacton-on-Sea by-election?
Well, you'd be welcome to, but I don't think the odds you would get would be particularly favourable. It certainly looks, for this by-election, like Nigel Farage will not face any serious challenge, unless you count Binface, and so that means that he's pretty much certain to romp home and will presumably increase his majority substantially. But it's not about, of course, this by-election. It's about a future by-election that could take place or other circumstances surrounding it more nationally.
Well, Joe, what's going to happen is Mr Farage is going to enjoy a huge public platform for several weeks in the course of this campaign. He'll have no rivals, no other candidates apart from Binface, and he is going to capitalise on that.
I'm not sure the public platform will be that huge, though, given that it will take place over the summer when traditionally we have less news going around. So yes, he may get some notice there, but the fact that there is no contest, no real contest, the fact that there are no opponents, that means that I just don't think this will be a big news story that will be covered very much. Not because of any animosity towards Nigel Farage from the media, but simply because it's not particularly interesting that this is now happening. It could be at the same time that that his public and personal circumstances are put up to more scrutiny because of the situation. But even that, I think, is unlikely to be changed now because of the fact that he's running.
Well, yes. Do you think what's happened in the last 24 hours could change the national picture, Joe?
Well, that, of course, is the really interesting question. What happens in Clacton is less important. The circumstances of a by-election are always weird and unusual, and this is particularly weird and unusual. But the impact that it has on the national picture is key here. The short answer is that each of these individual events, whether it's the by-elections, whether it's the recent revelations that were in the Sunday Times, whether it's the questions over donations, Individually, each of these is a talking point. It is not a turning point for either Nigel Farage or for reform nationally. But the cumulative effect that these have could inform voters and mean that they make up their mind when it comes to questions like, can they trust Nigel Farage? Is he the right person for the country? Does he make the best decisions? Those questions are answered by the cumulative effect of these things, and it may be that we see a negative impact. Alternatively, however, it may simply be that people have already made up their mind about Nigel Farage. Around 2/3 of people have an unfavourable view of him, around a quarter have a favourable view. But it's maybe that those people just don't change their minds because this is simply more of what they would expect.
Joe, lovely to have you on the show. Have an excellent Wednesday. We'll speak soon. Joe Twyman, founder of Delta Poll. What do you think about this, folks? Your reaction to this extraordinary gamble on the part of Nigel Farage. Will it work? Will it backfire? Our question this morning is a very simple one. Will Nigel have the last laugh? I'll be asking Zia Yusuf, the Shadow Home Secretary, at 9 a.m. Lots to come. This is Talk Breakfast.
Welcome to Down the Local, the show that goes from pub to pub across the country, speaking to the punters about the subjects driving us all nuts at the moment.
That's Rachel Reeves, Rachel Thieves, Rachel McCounts.
I don't really know Meghan Markle. I know Meghan Markle's from Seats, and that's about it.
I don't know about anyone else, and I don't know where this is going. I have 0% beers, and I feel
raising the flag, I think, is symptomatic of this desperation.
Is public transport good value for money?
No, it isn't.
You really don't like speaking to people.
UK on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk. Across the UK on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Three minutes past 8, top of the morning. Mark Dolan in for Jeremy Kyle, who returns tomorrow. And breaking this morning, if I win, you win. It's the biggest stunt in British political history. But will Nigel Farage's great gamble pay off? I'll be putting that question to Zia Yusuf, who is Reform UK's Shadow Home Secretary, at 9 a.m. Don't miss it. So with the other main parties not running a candidate, will a by-election victory in Clacton-on-Sea be legitimate? The Reform UK leader frames this contest as the people versus the system. So will it work? Can Nigel Farage bring down the establishment, or is this a pantomime and an empty stunt? Is it an insult to the voters of Clacton-on-Sea? Let me know your thoughts. My phone number is 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK in your message to 87222, or leave us a voice note, which is exactly what Phil has done. Take a listen.
Good morning, Mark, on a beautiful sunny day. Well, according to Badenoch, Nigel Farage is having a hissy fit, is he? Well, what are they doing by not standing anybody in the election? Are they having a little hissy fit? Well, we all know as well they're going to get trounced, and they don't want egg on their face and they don't want to suffer the embarrassment. They honestly do believe that we, the electorate, are stupid. Have a great day.
Phil, thank you for that. I completely agree. The contempt that the establishment have for the British people is wild, which is why we've had so many policies which are against the people and against the British national interest. The Chagos Islands giveaway, net zero, which is economic suicide and the effective deindustrialisation of the country. The cult of welfareism, which makes a mockery of going to work and working extra hours just to pay the bills, whilst others stay home and chill out. Let's not forget that statistic. I've got two stats for you that demonstrate broken Britain. One is 600,000 households are now better off not working than going to work. And my other favourite stat is that 1 in 6 of the Sunday Times rich list from last year have left the country. So if you don't think that Britain's broken, I can't help you. Let's take the views now of Anne Widdecombe, who is a former Home Office minister, broadcaster and best-selling author. Good morning, Anne.
Good morning, Mark.
Anne, did you anticipate that Nigel Farage would provoke a by-election when he announced that he'd be speaking about his future on X yesterday?
No, I certainly didn't anticipate it, but I have to say, I think it's the right course to take. Now, this is a very decisive man. I mean, this is the man who, for years and years and years, you know, we heard from successive governments, so you can't do anything about ECHR, we've just got to obey their judgments. And Nigel said, well, no, actually, we don't. Now, that is the sort of decision-taking that is needed in the leader of the country. And he has now taken a very similar attitude in this personal circumstance. And he has said, you know, I don't have to put up with all this hounding and harassment for as long as, you know, the establishment or the press fancy it. I can actually take matters into my own hands now. And that is what he's done. And I think that's what makes Nigel Farage so different.
But Anne, you believe in probity in public life. Is it not right that the parliamentary authorities want to investigate the nature of this £5 million gift, even if Mr Farage is vindicated?
Oh, I don't have a problem with the committee investigating anything it wants to investigate. But let's remember what happened with Boris Johnson. Boris's defence was that he didn't knowingly mislead the House. Yes, he said something that wasn't right, but he didn't know. And the committee actually, I mean, for the first time, changed the terms and said, well, actually, it wasn't necessary to prove that you didn't know. You know, you merely had to mislead Parliament. You didn't have to do it knowingly. Well, that was a complete change. You know, I've got very little trust left now in parliamentary processes. And if you look at this government, which has a majority on that committee, if you look at this government, you know, look at the way that it's reacted when it's felt vulnerable, you know, changes to political donations, cancelling local elections, we all remember that, you know, going for votes at 16, loosening the voter ID requirements, you know, you just name it. I mean, they react in such a way that is geared all around self-preservation now. Nigel is challenging that establishment, and he's called this the establishment versus the people, and I think that just about sums it up. And I'm delighted that he's taken this, because the attitude previously of politicians was that you just had to endure it. You gritted your teeth, and, you know, if you were being subject to fame after fame after fame and it wouldn't go away, you just carried on until your position became untenable. He's taking, and I drew the analogy with policy decisions earlier, he has taken this decision because he wants an end one way or the other. And he's right to do this. You know, they're going to lack credibility if there's a by-election and a huge majority for Nigel. There's going to be a great lack of credibility if he's still hounded and pursued.
Does this establishment of which you and Nigel speak actually exist?
Yes, I believe it does. Now, I didn't always believe in that theory, but I do think now that different parts of the establishment act in ways which I think are extremely questionable. We saw it over the banking scandal. And suddenly realised it wasn't just Nigel, a load of other people as well who didn't have the ability to publicise and fight it. So, yes, I think the establishment is there in that sense, yes.
However, Anne, it's not clear what will be achieved from this by-election, particularly given that the other parties are not standing. So therefore, if it's just Farage versus Count Binface, this is not serious politics, is it? It's student politics and it's a pantomime.
No, it's very serious politics. No, it's up to the other parties whether they stand or not. We know why they're not. They're threat. They know darn well they can't beat Nigel. They don't want to spend the resources campaigning and all the rest of it when they know they can't beat him. They're threat.
Farage versus Binface is not serious politics, Anne.
Can I finish? They're threat, so that's why they're not standing. Now, it's their decision not to stand, not Nigel's. Their decisions. And this is serious politics in this sense. Binface isn't serious politics, forget it. But what Nigel will spend that campaigning period doing is what he told us he would do. He will clear his name and he will ask the people of Clacton to express a vote of confidence in him. That is not pantomime. That is taking the initiative, thank heaven.
But Anne, why doesn't he clear his name with the parliamentary authorities rather than the people of Clacton who are going to vote for him?
And they've already said...
It's an empty gesture, isn't it?
And the parliamentary authorities...
Meaningless.
Can I finish?
Please do.
And the parliamentary authorities have already said, no, they're not going to report till September. I mean, there is no urgency there. And Nigel is saying, right, I'm not going through this until September. I'm not just going to let this go on. I'm going to challenge it. I'm going to face it down. That is the essence of Nigel.
But Anne, how does a certain number of people in Clacton re-electing Nigel clear his name? How does that clear him? I don't understand.
Well, sorry you don't understand.
I mean, it will tell us he's popular, but that's not the same as being cleared.
Yes, it is, if he puts the facts before the people of Clacton, and the people of Clacton decide in exactly the same way that you put facts to a jury. If he is putting facts to the people of Clacton, and the people of Clacton accept those facts and turn him with a thumping great majority, that is the people speaking.
I agree, Anne, I agree, if the other parties run. But in the absence of Labour, the Lib Dems and the Conservatives, this victory will not be legitimate and it will clear nothing.
Of course it's legitimate. I mean, we had exactly the same in Holton, Price and Howden and I thought it was a bad move at the time, but David Davis stood and the other parties took one look. I mean, this was a solid Tory seat. They weren't going to win. They didn't stand. I think what actually matters now is the people of Clacton saying, we believe in Nigel, and that, I think, will add enormous strength.
But Anne, it would mean that Reform voters have voted Reform. That's not a story, is it?
Well, it depends, first of all. I mean, if, for example, his majority will obviously increase because there are no other candidates. But if his vote increases, if there's a very solid... I mean, the press will be there every day in Clacton. And if Nigel's side of this can be properly reported, maybe it's an advantage. Maybe it's an advantage that there won't be the opposition. I don't know. But what I do know is this is a decisive action from a decisive man, and I yearn for him to lead the country because he'll take exactly that same level of decisiveness to the task.
Well, Anne, you're decisive and you've been incredibly ideologically consistent for so many years, which is why you felt you needed to leave the Conservative Party, firstly to get Brexit done, and also because on a different media network you told me on air that the Tories are institutionally woke. You've been proven right. Can I ask you about the wider project and the Reform UK issue? Do you think, Anne, that if Nigel had his time again, he would have declared the 5 million, notwithstanding that it was a gift?
Only he can answer that, Mark. Only he can answer these questions about his financial...
Would it have been probably the better thing to do, even if it was a gift, just to be upfront? Because he's a very straight talker, isn't he, just like you?
I'm not going to say that because I do not know the details. Now, there's a massive commentary going on at the moment from people who simply don't know the details. And
if it was your 5 million, Anne, would you have declared it? If it was a gift from a friend, and my God, if I had 5 million, I'd give it to you because you are 1 in a million and you would be worth every penny. You'd be forced to have afternoon tea with me every day, but that's fine. Everyone has a price to pay. But if someone had bunged you 5 mil, you would have declared it, Anne.
Oh, I ideally wish I had friends who could tell me 5 mil. Absolutely love it. I might or might not, depending on the circumstances. Now, that is the crunch test here. You know, were the circumstances such that it should have been declared or that it shouldn't? Yes, you're quite right. I always erred on the side of caution. I declared the last bunch of flowers because that way there could never be any question. But Nigel is actually, and I think this is worth looking at, Nigel is interpreting the rules in the way that they were originally envisaged, which was, is there anything which might reasonably influence the way you vote and the decisions you take in Parliament? That was the original intention of the register. It wasn't for me to have to declare that I had been interviewed by Basil Brush because it might influence my vote on hunting. You know, I mean, absolute rot. I mean, you know, there was a serious purpose to it. Now it's just a game.
Well, Anne, I do tend to agree with you because ultimately, as Parliament look at this, the authorities look at this £5 million donation, they cannot, can they, Anne, beyond reasonable doubt, prove that this was not a gift, because they would have to be mind readers and see inside the mind of Nigel Farage. Ultimately, it's their word against his. So if they rule against him, that will be inference. Well, that's not very solid, is it? That was something that did for Prince Harry in the High Court yesterday.
Yes, and I'm delighted that it did do for Prince Harry in the High Court yesterday. But that's a side issue.
Inference is not evidence.
Quite right. Brilliant. Quite right. I'm not going to argue with that.
And Anne, what about the link between this generous donation and Mr. Farage's enthusiasm for cryptocurrency? Could the two things be connected?
I doubt it very much, but it's a bit like Christopher Harborne saying, for example, that he gave the gift to Nigel because he was so delighted with the work he'd done on Brexit. But that doesn't mean that he gave the gift to Nigel in order that he could achieve Brexit. He was already trying his hardest and spent 20 years trying to do that. It was merely saying, oh, you know, I do like what you're doing and I want to reward you. But the reason that I said at the beginning, you've just said, you know, you have to be mind readers to know what was going on. The reason I said at the beginning is that I can't answer questions about Nigel's finances. Only he can, and in this by-election he will.
And Anne, before we let you go, how do you see all of this playing out? Do you think that Nigel will have the last laugh? Because I'm wondering, for example, whether it would be very embarrassing for the parliamentary authorities if they provoke yet another by-election after this one. Has Nigel set an extraordinary bear trap for them?
I certainly think that, you know, they will have to hesitate about, you know, a third election. I mean, they've had a general election. Now they're getting a by-election, inflicting another by-election won't go down well, not only in Clacton, it won't go down well anywhere. And I think most people will say enough is enough. But we'll have to see. I'm not a mind reader. I can't say what the committee will do.
And always a joy and a deep privilege to have you on the show. We are your #1 fan. We look forward to catching up soon. My thanks to the redoubtable Anne Widdecombe, former Home Office Minister, broadcaster, best-selling author and politics legend. We love having Anne on. She's very forthright. She doesn't take any nonsense, does she? One of the best Prime Ministers we never had. Let's listen to Farage, who insists that he's done nothing wrong.
Let me be absolutely clear. After the furore and the media pile-on, well, not just the media, the other political parties too, let me be absolutely clear. I have done nothing wrong. I have not broken the law in any way at all. I have not misused public money. And you know, for the first 2 years of being an MP, my personal MP expenses are zero.
Zia Yusuf, the Shadow Home Secretary for Reform UK, is live on Talk Breakfast in just 40 minutes' time at 9 a.m. You won't want to miss it. Bring popcorn. I guarantee it's going to kick off. Fireworks. Mix my metaphors. Choose your metaphor. Folks, a simple question this morning. Will Nigel Farage have the last laugh. Here's a voice note from Laura.
Morning, Mark. Laura in Wiltshire. If Nigel has done something wrong, fine. Let's let the Privileges Committee look into that. But my understanding is that his various properties have actually been declared. They're just not all owned in the standard way that most people do. I haven't got a problem with that. His gift was a gift before he was an MP, unlike Starmer's gifts from Lord Alley, who was given a Downing Street pass and a say in which MPs were going to be selected for various jobs. It was a far, far dirtier business, and nobody was kicking up about that, and the Standards Committee didn't get involved in that, and there was no by-election for Starmer, was there? The fact that nobody else is going to stand anyone in the Clacton by-election is just a sign that the parties are terrified of him. They now want to try and make a fool of him. And I think one of the brilliant things he's done is said that Reform will pay for the by-election. So that puts, you know, a stop to Rupert Lowe's nonsense about this being a waste of time. I'm horrified what they're doing, and I think I'm most horrified for his family and his daughter. They're private individuals, and the treatment has been disgusting. Anyway, great show.
Laura, thank you for an excellent voice note. It's very interesting because Reform UK have offered to pay for this by-election, which is a very canny move. But it's our understanding that the authorities will not allow that to happen, and it will come from the Treasury. It's an interesting conversation, isn't it? Will Nigel have the last laugh? I'll be asking one of the most high-profile Reform UK supporters next.
The thing that most makes me angry about Keir Starmer, talking about the need to defend our country, and he's gone out of his way to not make the tough decisions, to actually do the thing to defend our nation. It's cowardly, and I think it's treacherous.
Nothing to say on immigration, nothing to say on benefits, nothing to say on jobs, nothing to say on tax. Absolutely appalling. If this is the solution the country's been waiting for, then we are in a very, very bad place.
People up and down the country are asking why they are always being put second. They work every day, they get up, they pay their bills, they look after their kids, and yet the other side of the social contract is not being held up.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
.23, Mark Dolan with you for Talk Breakfast. The brilliant Jeremy Kyle returns tomorrow. Zia Yusuf, Reform UK's Shadow Home Secretary, live at 9. Will Nigel have the last laugh? Who better to ask than one of the most respected journalists in the country and Talk's international editor, Isabelle Oakshott. Good morning, Isabelle.
Good morning.
Well, that put a cat among the pigeons, didn't it?
It sure did. And I think that the other parties who, as we've been talking about this morning, have had their own form of hissy fit and decided that they're not going to stand in this, are furious because they didn't see it coming. I'm quite surprised they didn't see it coming. I mean, it's vintage Nigel, isn't it? Is he going to sit around for ridiculous periods of time while every media outlet continues to harangue him about the 5 million and numerous other things? Is he going to sit around while the Standards Commissioner, who's already had a couple of months to decide one very simple question, did this or didn't this break parliamentary rules, strings it out forever longer, causing more and more damage to Nigel Farage and Reform? Or is he going to just seize the bull by the horns? Nigel would always seize the bull by the horns in those circumstances. But the other parties didn't see this coming, which I find quite funny. I certainly did. And they are unprepared. What they would have liked to have done, I am sure, is come up with a so-called unity candidate. They would like to have tried to stitch it up between them so that there's only one candidate on the left, for example. But they haven't had time to do that, which is all part of Nigel's strategy in springing the surprise. They've only got, I think the by-election period is actually only 4 weeks, not 6, as is sometimes reported, but we need to check on that.
Yeah.
They just haven't had time to prepare. So they've all thrown their toys out the pram and said, well, we're not going to stand at all. But what we will do is stand when we've got a bit more notice so that we can try and stitch it up a second time. They want a second by-election. I mean, it's comical.
Well, it's a remarkable political stunt, and it surprised many people, if not you, Isabelle. But will it backfire given the fact that the other parties are not participating? Will it lack legitimacy? How does it clear Nigel's name if Reform UK voters vote Reform?
Well, I think, if I may, that it isn't quite the right question. So I
thought it was a brilliant question. I was actually quite proud of it.
I think you initially said, will it lack legitimacy? All those things. I think
such a good question. I'm quite proud of myself.
No, there's a better one. Will it work? That's the key question. If I'm going to be devil's advocate here, and I think you're doing a brilliant job of really subjecting this to an inquisition, because I heard you ask the same questions to Anne Widdecombe. I think the real question for Reform supporters and for Reform's leadership is this going to work? I think it was absolutely the right thing to do, but will it be enough to shut everybody up? And I am concerned that it won't be. The determination of Nigel's detractors to keep going in a way that is corrosive to Reform UK, not just to Nigel, but is corrosive to the party and its ability to disentangle itself from this mire, is quite phenomenal. They are indefatigable, these people. They are determined to get him in any which way. And if there's going to be a second by-election, it just carries it on and on and on. That is one thing I did not see coming. I could not have imagined that people would be so ridiculous as to be baying for a by-election if Nigel's found guilty, as it were, by a standards committee. But then when he calls one himself, go, well, actually, it's not the actual by-election we want. We want another one in a few months' time. So honestly, I've been in politics for 20 plus years. That is a level of lunacy that I just didn't see.
And I think you've actually demonstrated your journalistic and political chops. And I'm going to grant you that actually the bigger, more important question is, will it work? You're absolutely right, because that's the issue. How consequential will this be? And I think it could potentially be a masterstroke, Isabelle, because it demonstrates two things. It demonstrates that Nigel Farage has extraordinary political courage, that he's got a set of balls on him. It also demonstrates very, very acutely that he is the anti-establishment candidate.
It does. It absolutely does that. And I think he will increase his vote, which is a very useful thing to do. And it does give him a very useful line when hostile media and even media such as ourselves continue, because I don't think talk would regard itself as hostile to Reform, but many of our presenters, like yourself, like Julia Hartley-Brewer, will always ask difficult questions, even if we know that a lot of our listeners are supporters of Farage. It will give him a very clear line, won't it? Which he's perhaps lacked all this time. Up till now, the best he's been able to say is, look, I'm certain I did nothing wrong. This is in the hands of an investigation. But now he can say, I have put this question to the people in the biggest, most dramatic way I can. I can't put it to the whole country because I'm not Prime Minister. I don't have the power to call an election. I think if he were Prime Minister at this point, he would be calling an election, but he's not. He can only call a local election. And so he can forevermore say, I put this to the people that sent me to Westminster, that is the people of Clacton and Essex, and their verdict was that maybe even if they do think there's something a bit funny about the 5 million, even if they're maybe a bit envious of it, frankly, I wouldn't mind somebody giving me a fraction of that money with no strings attached. They've decided that what I can do for the country is more important than my complex financial affairs and then my friendships with George Cotterell.
Nigel Farage had nothing to lose by declaring the 5 million to the parliamentary authorities. It may well be proven he didn't have to because it was a gift, is his argument. And I think it's his word against theirs, which is why I don't think they can rule against him, because that would be inference, not evidence. But if he had his time again, Isabelle, do you think he would have declared the 5 million?
I would. So I'm a bit nervous to put myself in Nigel's mindset. You know, he doesn't always approach things in the way that others necessarily would. I'm a journalist. I'd be ultra cautious about something like that. Being a journalist, I just know what is the worst that's going to be said about pretty much anything. And I kind of know the worst will be said about pretty much anything when it comes to politics. So being a journalist, I'd have probably approached it differently. But Nigel's not a journalist. He's got many other things going on. And it is evident that he took a lot of advice about this. You could see from the way that he approached that statement yesterday that he truly does believe he's done nothing wrong. And on that count, if he believes he's done nothing wrong, which he evidently does, I understand why he was loath to declare it, because potentially we'd have had 2 years of this rather than what we've already had, which is however many months. And people would have just gone on and on and on and on. So if he truly believed that he did not need to, which he clearly does truly believe, and had taken advice that he did not need to, I understand why he didn't want endless questions about it.
Well, I completely agree with you. And it's interesting because you talked about how protracted this investigation is proving to be. And it's a good example, isn't it, of how the establishment operate, Isabelle, that the process is the punishment.
Yeah, I mean, it's one question. I don't know how
this could be done and dusted in a morning.
It could be, much like many of the other things that are the powers that be deal with. You know, tens of thousands of asylum claims that I could deal with one a day.
Yeah.
You know, probably more than that, and rattle through it. But that is not how processology works. And I'm not impugning the Standards Commissioner. I'm sure that they are impartial, but there are big politics at play here. Nothing less than the future of our country and who's in charge. And Nigel Farage is a radical reformer. And I heard the interesting conversation you had earlier with Anne Widdecombe, where you said, you know, is there such a thing as the establishment? And it's all too easy for us commentators to trot out these phrases as if everyone knows what we mean. So I thought it was a good question to ask. What is there such a thing? What we mean by that, well, what I mean is all the vested interests that do really well out of the system as it is, the comfortable, complacent professionals and public sector workers who feed off the status quo. I'll just give one example for people who wonder what we mean by the establishment. The BBC. That is the ultimate symbol of the establishment. And Nigel Farage has said that he plans, if he gets into power, to dismantle the funding system of the BBC. Therefore, you have an entire institution for whom this is existential, for whom, if reform gets in, they're going to lose their jobs. And that's just one little example. You know, we've got thousands of civil servants, thousands of people that work in bloated public sector organisations for whom Nigel Farage represents a massive threat to their paychecks. That's what we mean by the establishment, and by God, it does exist.
There's also a very important point underpinning all of this, Isabelle, which is the safety of arguably the most high-profile politician in the country, perhaps second only to the PM, and that is Nigel Farage. He's an incredibly recognised figure. He faces multiple threats, many of which we know nothing about. Does it shock you, given the murders of Joe Cox and David Amis, the so-called establishment do not take the safety of someone like Nigel Farage seriously, someone ahead in the polls who is likely going to be, after Andy Burnham, our next Prime Minister?
Well, I mean, I take it very seriously because having been around the party for so long, I'm fully aware of the very real danger that he faces on an hour-by-hour basis. Nigel can't really go anywhere. No. You know, if he wants to go out for dinner with friends, you know, go to the pub or something like that.
Which he does like to do.
All has to be meticulously planned beforehand. Yeah. The resources that have to go into this are extraordinary. He's never forgotten being in the centre of Edinburgh, in the old town of Edinburgh, many years ago, and basically being imprisoned in that pub as an angry mob descended. They had to lock the doors. He was stuck in there, and that is what would happen almost anywhere he went. I mean, there was an awful scenes when I don't even know if he was, how much time he spent there, outside another restaurant up in Newcastle, a bunch of mad lefties wearing purple trousers and strings in their hair gathered outside the pub and were shouting expletives. It was grotesque behaviour. This is what he faces on a daily basis. That is what happens to people who threaten to upend the status quo in this country. And it's very, very real. And people keep saying, well, he's not Joe Cox, he's not David Amis. Well, isn't that the point? We're trying to make sure that he isn't those victims of murder and tragedy. And no, surely even his critics don't want that.
Most definitely. And Christian, my producer, just mentioned a good point that Nigel Farage probably faces a more serious threat to his safety and well-being than even Prince Harry. Isabelle, can I get a quick line from you before we let you go in regard to the Duke of Sussex, who has suffered a crushing defeat in his £15 million hacking case against the publisher of the Daily Mail? What are the implications of this judgment for our free press?
Well, I think it was a great day yesterday for the free press. I'm a newspaper journalist by background. It's how I started out. I will always be a writer. I love newspapers. We've got brilliant newspapers at News UK, Our Times, Sunday Times, The Sun, and I've worked for many of these titles and worked for long years for associated newspapers, the Mail, the Daily Mail and the Mail on Sunday, which were at the heart of the Prince Harry claim. And I mean, this was just absolutely without foundation. The claims that Prince Harry made against those newspapers were preposterous and relied on casting fine, upstanding journalists who were truth seekers as muckrakers and people that resorted to illegitimate means to get to the truth. And so it was a wonderful victory. The Mail today is sort of 12 pages of it. And I understand that. This tied them in knots for years. You know, I've had conversations pretty recently, in recent weeks, with senior Mail figures who sort of said, look, I can't focus on anything else at the moment. I'm just trying to get through this Prince Harry court case. It has been a drain on that news organisation, as it will be a drain on our own in similar circumstances. We've had the brickbats, haven't we, at News UK? Well, we all live to fight another day as we continue trying to bring great exclusives expose the truth about powerful figures and petulant royals without fear or favour.
Now, the huge cost of this loss is not going to be felt keenly by Sir Elton John, who's one of the richest musicians in the world, Isabelle. That's a couple of concerts and he's paid for it. It's loose change down the back of the sofa. But if it's £2, £3, £4 million for Prince Harry, well, that's money he hasn't got. Plus, there's the impact on his reputation. I mean, you have to wonder, don't you, about brand Sussex. If you look at the fact that Invictus are losing sponsors left, right and centre, African Parks, upon which he's on the board, shrouded in controversy around the treatment of African tribes, the effective shuttering of Archwell Philanthropies, his charity organisation, and the small matter of having lost control of Sentebale, a charity he co-founded in the memory of his mother, Diana. It's not been a good week for Harry.
I mean, I sort of found myself sighing as you read all of that out, because it's actually really sad. You know, we the British people, I think, only want the best for Harry as a British royal. You know, I don't take any delight in the sort of dismantling of Prince Harry's reputation that he's done to himself. And the vanity of the man. You know, he mentioned it earlier. I'm sure Nigel Farage is a much bigger target. Frankly, who the hell wants to attack Prince Harry? He's a galloping fool, but he doesn't threaten to upend our country and all our institutions. And I just think the vanity of the man constantly thinking that everybody's lying in wait to attack him and his family. I don't think anyone really cares. You know, if you just came in incognito, put a cap on, a pair of sunglasses, you know, there are however many, 60 million people in England. I don't think he's going to be instantly spotted if he didn't have to have a massive entourage and make a great deal of parade about everything.
What are the implications, Isabelle, for brand Sussex in regard to this judgment? Yet another loss for Harry. Let's not forget, by the way, people forget this, Isabelle, that he withdrew his legal action against the publishers of the Mail on Sunday in January 2024, which probably cost him about £1.5 million. So he's been there before. What does this do to the Sussex brand?
Well, nothing good. I mean, it just makes them look foolish, and it turns a paper that was long very, very supportive of Harry's mother, the late Princess Diana, into an enemy. I mean, he's got 11 or more pages today, wall to wall, you know, in short, Harry's an idiot coverage. It's just such a self-inflicted wound, like so much else that the Sussexes do. Why didn't he just come to the UK and stay with his dad and be like a proper son? You know, be an upstanding member of the royal household. The British people are so forgiving, I think. I think we would love, you know, most of us are supporters of the monarchy, not all, but most of us, and would love nothing more than the return of the prodigal son. But it just seems that is too much for him and his spoilt wife, and they just can't be like a normal family and dutiful for all the privileges that they've got. And instead, it's all about trading off the name and constantly playing the victim card. And I think people are done with it. We'll still forgive if he wants to do a great culper and come home. Everyone would love it.
Isabelle, just briefly before we get to a final question about Farage and the politics that we've seen in the last 24 hours, just on a human level, where is Harry's head at? Because it strikes me that he now has the reverse Midas touch. Everything's been a disaster. The broadcast deals have disappeared. We mentioned the charity issues. There was the public row with Buckingham Palace about whether they offered him accommodation or did not, which was very damaging. There's no guarantee now the king will meet him. Where do you think his head is at? He seems to lack judgment and he seems to be making all the wrong choices.
I mean, I'm no psychologist, and I think that living abroad allows him that level of separation from the absolute disaster that he has made of his life in the UK. So it's evident they're very happy over there, as happy as they can be. And how can anyone be super happy if they've fallen out so badly with those closest to them? So I imagine that going back to America allows him to step away from the horror show of his relationship with his nearest and dearest, and his reputation in this country. But you've got to imagine that his heart aches. You have to imagine that. It's such a big thing to walk away from things in the way that he has done. And I imagine in his heart of hearts, what he really wants is to come back to the UK and make amends. That is, I'm just totally speculating here, but I think that Meghan will never allow him to do that, or not in the short term, until they're on their uppers.
Isabelle, finally, Sky News were doing their job when they sent a reporter to ring the doorbell of a property at which Nigel was registered to vote at the last election.
Well, I was slightly dreading you asking me this question. I've gone on about how I'm a journalist. I love knocking doors. I've done many, probably thousands of door knocks over the years. When I was on tabloid papers, I was constantly on the road, approaching people's properties and knocking on the door and seeing if I got welcomed in or told, frankly, where to go. So it's true that this is a normal journalistic tool, but Nigel Farage and his family are not normal targets. And what I think has been reprehensible in this case is that Sky News was not straight about what happened. It's taken the multiple versions of events to actually fess up and say what they did do. I don't believe that they were deliberately setting out to make life uncomfortable for Nigel's daughter. I don't know who they thought was resident at the property, but I really do understand why that felt like the last straw for Nigel. Perhaps he'd had a very upsetting conversation with other members of his family. The pressure that they're under must be an absolute nightmare. Imagine having the Farage surname and all the misery that will go with that from his critics when you don't even want to be in public life yourself. So as a journalist, yes, I understand this is a normal thing to do. But as someone who knows Nigel and knows what he and his family go through, I also understand why this was so upsetting for him, especially given that Sky dissembled about what happened.
Isabelle, fantastic to have you on the show this morning. Thank you for your valuable time. Isabelle Oakshott is Talk's international editor. A simple question this morning: will Nigel have the last laugh? 8:47, this is Talk Breakfast.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Talk Breakfast, 8:48. Mark Dolan with you until 10 a.m. Zia Yusuf, Reform UK's Shadow Home Secretary, live on the show in 10 minutes' time. Don't miss it. Will Nigel have the last laugh? This from Nigel in Brighton, referring to Nigel Evans, who is the former Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons. Nigel Evans is right, says Nigel in Brighton. He's right that journalists can ask about money and property. Nobody sensible argues otherwise. That was never the issue. The issue is consistency and volume. When it's one of their own, the BBC's tone is measured and it moves on. When it's Farage, it runs and runs and runs. That is a judgment about editorial choice, not about whether the questions are fair. And now watch the framing. He has resigned to avoid scrutiny, they say. He's done the opposite, in fact. He's handed it to the people of Clacton to judge. And that's far harder of a test than any committee. Nigel goes on to say, if they wanted him held to account, they should welcome that, not sneer at it. The fact that Labour, the Tories and the Lib Dems are all refusing to stand tells you they would rather not let the public decide at all. Herbie is in Harrow. Good morning, Herbie.
I think Nigel's done the right thing there. He's thrown the gauntlet and he said, now prove me wrong. It's your choice, your chance to prove me wrong. All the other parties keep on moaning and groaning. Stand and fight the man and say, we are here because we defend the rights for people to understand what's gone on and what Nigel's been doing. Prove him wrong. Here's the opportunity, and they're not taking it up. What does that tell you, Mark?
And will Nigel have the last laugh, Herbie? Is it going to work, this gamble?
Well, I hope so, because he's done the right thing. I mean, to say he's taken a chance. He may not be elected, but I'm sure he will be. But the other parties have got this opportunity. They keep on knocking him. They keep on running him down. Prove him wrong. Here's your opportunity. Fight the case. Put your propaganda out there. Put your leaflets out there telling them why they shouldn't vote for Nigel in Clacton. Come on, here's your chance.
Herbie, brilliant call. Thank you. Call us again soon, 0344 499 1000. Mark, Nigel Farage says making money is not a crime, but how you make money should be under scrutiny, especially if you're in a public role. How are these so-called humble servants in public life so rich? Natasha, Mark, if we're going to discuss whether Nigel is using the people of Clacton for his own ends, what about Burnham and the people of Makerfield? Surely that is double standards. Interesting. Well, let me take another call if I can. Andy is in Hackney. Oh, no, we've got Bob. My goodness. Let's go to Clacton-on-Sea in Essex, which is going to be at the heart of this story. That's where the by-election is happening. Good morning, Bob.
Mark, it's great to talk to you. It's really a pleasure.
Well, thank you.
It's great.
Well, me too. It's lovely to have you calling, Bob. First of all, I love having everyone's opinions, especially if you're in Clacton-on-Sea, because it's your constituency, it's your home where this by-election is going to happen. Are you happy that it's happening?
Yeah, I think, personally, I think Mr. Farage has made a fantastic move in this whole gambit of things. He's just put everything on the line. And I've had the pleasure of sharing a couple of pints with Nigel in one of our local pubs. And I find him a thoroughly decent guy. Like, you know, when you look at the other people who are party leaders, per se, and you sort of, then you talk to somebody who is, to me, totally genuine, and I think he's put his reputation on the line, and he's running the game, shall we say.
And what you see is what you get with Nigel Farage, Bob, because I was in your beautiful town just 2 weeks ago. I spent half a day with Nigel because I did an exclusive interview for the Daily Express, and it was a very interesting conversation, Bob. He was on great form. It was a nice sunny day in Clacton. Can't believe I missed the music festival, which happened at the weekend on the pier. In fact, I think it was about 3 or 4 weeks in a row. It's a buzzing place with a very passionate population who will no doubt re-elect the guy. How's the news going down, Bob, in Clacton-on-Sea about yesterday's announcement?
Right. I think there's, you know, when Nigel decided to run for a seat in Parliament, he obviously, I mean, there's no such thing as a safe seat, but I mean, he knew that Clacton was a very pro-Brexit constituency, so he knew that it was his best chance of getting elected as an MP, and he was right on that score as well. Like, you know, so I like the man. I think everybody does who has an atom of respect for our country, because all of the others seem to want to backtrack and curtail to the EU, which we obviously didn't. I mean, 17.4 million people said we don't want to be in this club anymore. You know.
Well, listen, Bob, I'm so glad that you called the show, and I've got a job for you. I'm going to make you our official Talk Breakfast Clacton-on-Sea correspondent. So I want you to call me when I'm on air, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, breakfast, or frankly, any of my colleagues. But let's make you our correspondent and you can tell us what's happening on the ground. Thank you for that, Bob, and thank you for your very kind words about the show. Very excited to say the World Cup is going to be won by England. It's just guaranteed. And the man that's going to confirm that is the chief EFL writer at The Sun. Take a listen to this.
90 minutes in 90 seconds from The Sun.
Come on, Justin, it's coming home. Don't pop my balloon.
Yeah, just free game potentially to do it. Surely it's coming home this time, right? I'm not quite as confident as you are, but yeah, we're certainly in the mix.
Yes, how hard a nut are Norway going to be to crack?
Yeah, going to be difficult. I mean, they're ranked 19th, I think, in the world. So, you know, technically you think, well, we're fourth. We're, you know, on paper, man for man, we're better. But of course, they have a certain Erling Haaland up front. 7 goals already, joint top scorer in the tournament. It's going to be a hell of a challenge. And he's going to be up against a couple of his teammates and people that know him well. Mark Gooey on our back page today says it's going to be fun to face his teammate. But the ominous thing there is when he played against him, I think it was 7 times, he's never won against him. And Haaland, guess what, has scored 7 goals in those 7 games. So, you know, it's going to be difficult. But of course, you know, Nico O'Reilly knows him very well from Man City. John Stones has played against him. And Ezri Konsa, who's going to start at centre-half, I would have thought. He has a really good track record against him. They faced each other 5 times, and Haaland has only won 1 game and only scored 1 goal. So there is some optimism there.
What a tragedy for Jordan Henderson, who's out of the tournament after an accident celebrating England's victory against Mexico. Are we able to bring someone in to replace him, Justin?
No, unfortunately not. I mean, the squad is the squad, so no one can come in. However, you know, there are options there. You know, obviously, Elliot Anderson has got the position at the moment. You've got Mainu, who can play there too, Reece James. But actually, I think John Stones will be the person. John Stones has actually played against Haaland when Man City played Dortmund years ago in the Champions League and actually had him in his pocket.
Justin, you put a smile on my face. I'm convinced it's coming home. Can I say that you and your colleagues are doing an incredible job at The Sun? I'm loving the football coverage, and it's going to be an amazing tournament. My thanks to Justin Allen, chief EFL writer at The Sun, which is #1 for football scoops. Look, we need the World Cup, don't we? This country needs a bit of good news. You've got Prince Harry suing our national newspapers. You've got our democracy in crisis with, by the way, a guy parachuted in from Manchester to become Prime Minister. Lots more to come. This is Talk Breakfast.
Some breaking news this morning revealed that under the Terrorist Act, 242 people were arrested in the year to June of this year.
That's something you can indulge in as to all the people who aren't going to prison because, well, there's no prison spaces.
So this is a talk exclusive we've been looking at.
I said, you take these cuffs off me and speak to me like a human being rather than a common criminal.
You're just left wondering, does these people who lead us actually hate Britain? Yeah. Do they not love our country and everything that we've stood for?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk. Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
(3:03), Mark Dolan, Talk Breakfast. Lovely to have your company. Jeremy Kyle is back tomorrow. Nigel Farage has resigned his seat at Clacton-on-Sea, provoking a by-election. Will Nigel have the last laugh? Who better to ask than Reform UK's Home Affairs spokesperson, Zia Yusuf. Good morning, Zia.
Good morning.
Well, many of us didn't see that coming. What is the thinking behind this move?
Well, look, we've had a ongoing witch hunt now for weeks against Nigel Farage, an extraordinary witch hunt, actually, given the total lack of scrutiny for Mr. Andy Burnham, who, last I checked, is literally going to become the Prime Minister of this country in a few days' time without any mandate at all. But here's the most important point, that, as we know, parliamentary standards is investigating as a result of complaints that have been made, and they're going to continue that investigation. But the most severe sanction that committee can impose on Nigel, if they find against him, which we believe they will, because Nigel's done nothing wrong. But the most severe sanction would, of course, be something that leads to a parliamentary by-election. What Nigel has done is say, look, instead of letting Labour and the Tories try and fight him through their friends in the media, who appear in some cases to be willing to break the law, let's go to the ultimate authority, the highest possible authority, and ask them what they think of Nigel's performance and probity as a member of Parliament for Clacton-on-Sea. And of course, that is the great people of Clacton. And that's why he has called this by-election, which is absolutely the people versus the establishment.
Well, I think it was a political masterstroke, Zia, until Labour, the Lib Dems and the Tories decided not to field a candidate. It's now going to be Nigel versus Count Binface. Surely that wasn't the plan.
Well, we had to assume that there was a chance that this would happen. I mean, remember, what Nigel has done is actually show extraordinary courage in calling this election. And that's obviously in stark contrast to most of the political establishment. All they do is try and mitigate risk. But what I would encourage your listeners and viewers to do is ask yourself why. Why would Labour and the Tories especially choose to not stand candidates against a man who has been a thorn in their side, brought down umpteen of their prime ministers through his political campaigning in his career over the last few decades? Why? It's only one reason, and that is because they know that they would lose. And so therefore they want to go and continue. They want to try and continue to litigate this through their friends in the media. And in the end, it's going to be up to the people of Clacton-on-Sea, the great people of Clacton, to make a determination on Nigel's performance.
There will be no Labour, Tory, Restore or Lib Dem candidates or Greens, Zia. Now, as a proud patriot that you are, you'll be well aware that England are playing Norway on Saturday night. And if Norway were not on the pitch, you couldn't call that a victory. Well, that's what's going to happen in Clacton-on-Sea.
Well, no, the analogy doesn't quite work, because what Labour, the Tories and all these other parties have done is have effectively, knock over their king before the game even begins. What they've said is that we stand no chance of winning. They've shown immense disrespect to the electorate. And listen to some of the statements that we've heard from, for example, Kemi Badenoch, who said that she would not stand a Tory candidate in this, quote, fake by-election, would stand in, quote, the next one, which was an extraordinary statement. It would appear that Kemi Badenoch has an insight into what parliamentary standards are going to determine. It's unsurprising, because that's how the establishment operates. You've heard Ed Davey say with a sneering tone that Nigel Farage is trying to get the voters in Clacton, the people of Clacton, to help him out. And the tone with which he said people of Clacton was as if they were some sort of nefarious body. Well, no, Mr. Davey, actually, they are the most important people with regards to determining Nigel Farage's fate. They are the ones that matter. It is the voters. And we shouldn't forget, and I don't think your listeners would have forgotten, it was the Tories and Labour who coordinated together, of course, to cancel elections for millions of people in England in 2025, tried it again this year, but thankfully, because Nigel and Reform did a judicial review, we managed to prevent them from doing that, and they lost thousands of councillors between them, the Tories and Labour. So they hate democracy. The last thing they want is to give actual voters a say. We know that. There's plenty of evidence for that. And what Nigel is the opposite. Let's go to the highest possible authority and let the people of Clacton cast their vote. And, the legitimacy of an election is not determined by Kemi Badenoch or Keir Starmer or Andy Burnham or Ed Davey. And their decision about whether to stand a candidate or not. The legitimacy of a British election is intrinsic. We're going to fight that election, and I'm confident that the great people of Clacton will return Nigel Farage as an MP in the House of Commons.
Now, Zia, you are one of the country's highest profile politicians. You have designs on becoming the Home Secretary of this country. The polls would suggest you're heading in that direction. You're also an incredibly accomplished and successful businessman, and I think one of the more attractive aspects of the reform offer is to make the United Kingdom a business-friendly environment and to be very supportive of wealth creators who, as well as I do, pay so many of the taxes in this country. There's nothing entrepreneurial about being given £5 million by a rich person, is there?
No, but Nigel never claimed that was entrepreneurship. But what it was a payment which allowed Nigel to be safe. And look, I take this quite personally. Perhaps I shouldn't, because it's not really the done thing in politics. They advise you against it. But, I've worked with Nigel day, every single day for the last couple of years. I have seen firsthand the sacrifices that he makes. I was chairman of the party for the majority of the last couple of years, and I'm privy to his private security briefings, about which the public know precious, they only know a tiny fragment of the threats Nigel faces. And the fact that through decades of his political career, he has asked Home Secretary after Home Secretary for state protection, and they said no. They said no. And then when they finally did give him some security, they then cut it. Do you remember this? By 75%. And then Keir Starmer sent cabinet minister after cabinet minister to call Nigel, to equate Nigel to a Nazi. And frankly, to try to create, I called it stochastic terrorism. I think it was disgusting. It made me lose all respect for Keir Starmer. The idea he's a decent man is nonsense. And so the fact that a patriotic British citizen who's been extraordinarily successful in business saw fit to give Nigel an unconditional gift to be spent on security so that Nigel could be safe, I, for one, take my hat off to him. And I think there are millions of people around the country who did the same. And I want to make this point, too, because I've said this publicly. If we get a reform government and I'm the Home Secretary, and you can play these words back to me.
Yeah.
I don't, no matter how much I disagree with other MPs and their political views, it is unacceptable for anyone to be who is in public life as an MP to be worried about their safety. And I won't hesitate to deploy state resources to protect our MPs with whatever resources they need. No MP will ever come to me if I'm Home Secretary and ask for protection in the face of credible threats and be told no.
And Mr. Yusuf, it will be Farage versus Binface in Clacton-on-Sea. How does Reform UK voters voting Reform clear Mr. Farage's name?
Well, in the end, they're the only people that matter. And the bigger Nigel's majority in Clacton-on-Sea, the bigger the message is to the establishment. Again, look, when was the last time you see, we keep hearing that politics is broken and the parties can't work together. And look at the level of coordination from the establishment. Within a few hours, you had the Labour Party, the Conservative Party, the Liberal Democrats, the Green Party, all announced that they're not going to stand candidates, call the election fake, all of this stuff, say that they're going to stand in the next one, which is absolutely prejudging the investigation. And maybe there's a clue there as to what's really going on here, given it is actually a panel of MPs that determine any potential sanction. So I've said this earlier today, if HS2 was run with this level of coordination and efficiency by the political establishment, we would have trains twice the speed of sound for about £10. It's absolutely extraordinary. So when the establishment wants to mobilize, boy, can it mobilize. But unfortunately, it mobilizes to protect itself. In this case, to try to do in and to intimidate out of public life, Nigel Farage is simply not going to work. And that's why we have this people versus the establishment by-election.
Are you concerned, Zia, that there are figures within Reform UK who are leaking sensitive information about the party and about the boss?
No, listen, look, I think...
Is that just politics?
I don't have concerns about that. I mean, listen, I would point you to the fact that I saw the political correspondent for GB News posted just minutes before Nigel's statement yesterday that, senior figures in Reform, he couldn't get anything out of them as to what Nigel was going to announce. People heard it for the first time, and that's how we operate. But obviously, as you get bigger as a party, sadly, there are some people who might do that sort of thing. I don't know.
So
but
you don't deny that there may be figures within the Reform fold who are leaking negative things to the press?
I don't think that there are, but I wanted to make the point here that we will answer to anything that people throw at us. I mean, my God, think about what people have already thrown at Nigel and thrown at Reform over the next couple of years. Dominic Cummings explicitly said, if you remember, that he believes that there's unelected institutions in Britain will absolutely break the law, do illegal things in order to keep Nigel Farage out. We've got, certainly on its face, a case for that already. You may have seen this Guardian story that the NCA has leaked private and confidential information, which on its face does appear to be a criminal offence, and we're going to be pursuing that. You better believe that. So look, I think that's all part of politics. I would say the people around Nigel We are extremely loyal. And again, the acid test for that is nobody, not even the most well-connected senior political pundits and journalists knew what Nigel was going to announce until he said it.
And do you think the party have exaggerated the actions and motivations of Sky News with suggestions that somehow Nigel Farage's kid, to paraphrase Robert Jenrick on Sky News, was harassed by the news organisation?
Not at all. Not at all. I think it's disgraceful the way that they have behaved. I mean, let's just look at the facts. Right, I don't need to editorialize this. Let's look at the facts. What happened is a journalist for Sky News turned up at the home of Nigel Farage's daughter. And again, I wouldn't wish this on anybody. As much as I despise the politics of Ed Davey or Chris, I would never, ever, ever say that it is appropriate for a journalist to turn up at the home of somebody's child, particularly given the efforts Nigel has made to not put them, to keep them away from politics, which he does. And then to compound matters, instead of apologizing for that, they then came out, you may remember, those reports were, Sky News denies contacting Nigel's daughter. Well, then we published the receipts and we showed that it did happen. Now they're claiming that, we were just trying to find Nigel, as if nobody at Sky News has Nigel Farage's telephone number. It's an absolute disgrace. And you can watch that footage for yourself. I think it's a coordinated attempt to try to intimidate Nigel. And look, I want to reiterate this. It's very difficult being in public life. There's a reason why many people, great, talented people, don't want to do it, which is a shame. And that's why I'm saying it is. I would be saying exactly the same thing if this was the leader of any other party or another MP. I want to make sure MPs feel safe and have the level of protection that they need so they can articulate their political arguments effectively and without fear, whether or not I agree with them. And secondly, that there must be some standards in the media. Yes, you can absolutely. Here's the other evidence, by the way, that Sky claiming that they thought they were just trying to find Nigel. The evidence that they knew Nigel wasn't there is that they sent somebody to go and confront Nigel when he was getting off the plane. They actually knew precisely where Nigel was, and I take great exception to that. The turning up at Nigel's daughter's home, and there's no public interest in that whatsoever. I should also point out this comes within days, of course, of a broadsheet newspaper publishing a picture of Nigel Farage's daughter's home. You think those three things are not connected? I think it's a disgrace. And again, whether or not you agree with Nigel, agree with me or reform, I just think if we cannot operate like this as a country. There are some things that are off limits, and I think Sky's behaviour is appalling. I think they should apologise.
And I spent half a day with the boss, Nigel Farage, your boss, just 2 weeks ago in an exclusive interview for the Daily Express. He looked happy, relaxed, comfortable in his own skin. But we've had these rumours swirling around, Zia, that Nigel is ill, that he's got health issues, that he's exhausted, and that actually he doesn't even want the top job.
Well, I consider myself quite a high energy person, and Nigel consistently makes me feel low energy when I speak to him at 6:30 in the morning, and he's like a Duracell bunny. So if that's the case, then God help the rest of us. I would not take too seriously some of those things you read in the hostile media.
And can I ask you about Sky News? Will the party consider a boycott for future interviews as a result of this?
I mean, maybe. I mean, look, I think it is important that you have a healthy media ecosystem in this country. And again, this is about upholding standards in public life, of which the media have an important role to play. It's totally fair to scrutinize public figures like Nigel or myself, but it is totally unfair and unreasonable, and I think deeply unethical, to turn up at the daughter of at Nigel's daughter's home, and then B, to lie about it. I think those things are terrible, and I think they've backed themselves into a corner here. So let's see how they respond.
And we know, as we discuss every day here on Talk, Zia, that the country faces so many problems. We're paying a very high price for net zero policies, in fact, the highest energy cost in the developed world. It's the effective deindustrialisation of the country, and it's terrible news for the economy. And then we've also got the open borders, and we have the cult of welfarism. Are you concerned now that this is all about Nigel and turning into something of a pantomime?
No, so it's the opposite. So this is precisely why, one of the key reasons why Nigel has done this, because there was an article yesterday in the Times saying the earliest standards we're going to come to any determination would be September. So this would have kept this as as the main story for months and months, and we can ill afford that. British people are struggling in a cost of living crisis. We still don't have a functioning border. We've got well north of 1 million illegal migrants in this country. That number's growing all of the time. Our national security is a joke. Our defence and our armed forces have been hollowed out. And regardless, again, of your political persuasion, the majority of British people, poll after poll, shows that they see Nigel Farage and Reform as the real opposition, holding this awful Labour government to account. And given we're going to have a new Prime Minister who only 0.03% of the country voted for, taking office in just a few days, we're going to need Reform. We're going to need Nigel, clear-headed, focused on holding this awful Labour government to account. And I want to reiterate, we need a general election.
Fantastic to have you on the show. Zia Yusuf, thank you for your valuable time. Reform UK's Home Affairs spokesperson, very much foursquare behind his boss in effectively provoking a by-election at Clacton-on-Sea. Your reaction to what you've heard from Zia Yusuf, 0344 499 1000. Will Nigel have the last laugh? 9:19, this is Talk Breakfast.
Breaking news this morning revealed that under the Terrorist Act, 242 people were arrested in the year to June of this year.
Something you can indulge in as to all the people who aren't going to prison because, well, there's no prison spaces.
So this is a Talk exclusive we've been looking at.
I said, you take these cuffs off me and speak to me like a human being rather than a common criminal.
You're just left wondering, do these people who lead us actually hate Britain? Yeah. Do they not love our country and everything that we've stood for?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Your reaction to my conversation with Zia Yusuf, 0344 499 1000. I'll take your calls shortly. Here's a voice note from Tony.
Morning, Mark. It's Tony from Hampshire. Mark, I really hope you can read this message out. I think you summed it up perfectly a little while ago, saying that there's a lot of floating Conservative voters that might want to vote for Reform. Well, I'm definitely one of them, but I'm not 100% convinced with them. I've always been a bit wary of Nigel. I mean, the £5 million thing isn't a good look at all. I think he does need to answer questions on that one. As a party as a whole, I really need convincing. The ex-Tories that joined them, when they all say, oh, we tried to speak out when we were in the Conservative Party. I'm not convinced by that either. Great show, Mark.
Thank you, Tony. Well, I think that's going to be critical. If Reform want to win the next election, they will need working-class former Labour voters. I think those are nailed on now. They will also need right-wing voters. I think those are nailed on now. But what about those moderate Tories, the centrist dads? Surely Farage has to win their support if he's going to form an overall majority in the House of Commons. What do I know? I don't have the answer. The man that has the answer is Ryan Saby, who is the Deputy Political Editor at The Sun. Good morning, Ryan.
Good morning, Mark.
Really good to see you, and I'm so glad that you're here because I've got a million questions. First of all, this decision to resign his seat yesterday, a masterstroke or a political own goal?
Well, I think when you looked at it from the outset, it looked on the verge of being some kind of masterstroke, calling out the political establishment and trying to say, you're out to get me, so I'm going to put up, sort of a put up and shut up moment. I'm going to put myself up, I'm going to stand for election. But then things started to unravel quite quickly, because I think what Nigel Farage was really looking at was a contest, a big summer contest. Take all the energy and the oxygen out of the new Andy Burnham government, own the airwaves, own the agenda. But actually, once one party started to say, we're not going to stand, there was this domino effect. Restore Britain, the Greens, the Conservative Party, Labour, they all said they weren't going to stand against him in Clacton. Well, the only reason there's going to be a lot of interest in is because there is a contest, there is competition. And I think once you take that away, I don't know where that kind of leaves us. Is it going to be, lots of talk about Count Binface being the only person who's going to stand against Nigel Farage? Or could there be another candidate? I'll take you all the way back to 1997. Do you remember when Martin Bell stood against the
former BBC foreign correspondent?
Absolutely.
And he was the anti-sleaze candidate against Neil Hamilton.
Absolutely. Now, is there someone who comes forward and stands against Nigel Farage in that way? That's when it might become a bit more interesting, because at the moment we've got a situation where we could have a by-election in mid-August, and then we have the parliamentary investigator comes back and there could be a recall petition, and we could have a second by-election by the end of the year. So there could be 2 by-elections in Clacton within 3 or 4 months.
And it's interesting as to who that unity candidate for the left might be. It could be a celebrity, it could be Carol Vorderman, or it could be, who's that Manchester United player that's very
Gary
political?
Neville.
Could be Gary Neville.
Yeah.
Thank you for helping me with that.
No,
Sport is not my strong point.
I've been watching lots of the World Cup. But what I think the other parties may do, and what the celebrity or the sort of Mr. or Mrs. X may do, may just sit this one out, because they might want to show Nigel Farage up and say, why have you called this? You didn't really need to call it. It's going to cost the public purse £250,000. So we're going to make you look silly. Now, if there is a second contest, that's when they will pile on, because Nigel Farage has a majority of 8,000 there. When we used to look at safe seats, it was 20,000 plus, 25,000. 8,000, to me, in this period of political volatility, feels guessable, especially when the stakes are so high.
My goodness, so potentially Farage beats Binface in the first contest, what a sentence,
yeah,
and then falls to maybe a public figure, a celebrity candidate that the left unite around, or just what, the Labour candidate?
Yeah, or the Conservative candidate. We have Restore will be standing. Restore could take, they did pretty well in Makerfield. They took 7% of the vote. I would have thought that the area of Clacton will be quite fertile for Restore Britain as well. So let's just see. They've got a big online campaign. Let's not forget, left-wing voters might be encouraged to vote for Rupert in order to dilute Nigel. So therefore, you've got a scenario where Farage potentially beats Binface in a few weeks' time and then exits the House of Commons in a follow-up contest. You could quite see that. I mean, Clacton is a stronghold for reform, but when you have tactical voting on such a large scale, it's a high-profile seat. Who knows what will happen? It's a big gamble. He took a big gamble yesterday.
Well, that's right. And I communicated with my executive producer, Christian Mitchell, last night, and he texted me the following, because he's worked with Nigel Farage and is well connected politically, and said this may backfire for Nigel, and it looks like it is already. He hasn't thought out all scenarios. Do you think that's possible, that Reform did not war game this?
Yeah, totally. They would have fully expected that the other... I would have thought that they would have war-gamed that the other parties saw the seat of Clacton, winning that seat of Clacton, and the prize of toppling Nigel Farage was too big to resist. So they would have seen, up against a Conservative candidate, Labour would have put someone up. They would have all put candidates up. Now, did they see a scenario? I can't think of many other times where all the parties withdraw from a race. So that probably wasn't going through their minds when they made their decision. I'd be interested to maybe speak to people in Reform today to see whether they had actually thought that through. But he's got, he could get through the first one, and let's see if he gets through the second contest, if there is one.
What about those authorities in Parliament, I mean, do you think it'll be a slap on the wrist if if they feel that he cannot prove that 5 million was just a gift? I mean, is it going to lead to a length of suspension that would cause a by-election, or is that less likely? What's the mood music?
It could do. Now, there was Jess Phillips was speaking, the ex-Labour minister, overnight, and one of the things she said that when you are involved in the Standards Commissioner inquiry, what happens is that sometimes you might get a heads up of actually what's happening, their thought process, and what the likely outcome, or at least the direction of travel. It may be that Nigel Farage has had correspondence from them and said, look, here's a summary of what's happening, what we're thinking, how are you going to respond to this? Now, he may have seen the writing on the wall and decided to go early, actually. So, but what the fundamental issue is, Nigel Farage thinks he's done nothing wrong. Does the Parliamentary Commissioner think, OK, you may not have done anything wrong in terms of the law, but in terms of letting the parliamentary authorities know that you have accepted this money or these donations, you needed to comply with those rules and let us know. So he may not have done anything wrong, apart from, in terms of the law, but in terms of actually sticking to the parliamentary procedures, he may get a slap on the wrist for saying, look, you may not have done anything wrong, but you should have at least informed us you are standing for elected office, and anything that takes place in that year up until you get elected, you have to let us know. That's where he may fall foul. And if he does, and it does then trigger the recall petition, I think they've got 6 weeks to get 10% of the electorate, which then triggers the by-election.
So, just briefly, you're suggesting that perhaps Nigel has rolled the dice on this one because he may have anticipated that there would be this recall and that there would be a by-election. Is that right? Is that your potential reading of it?
One thing that Nigel Farage and Reform and all the parties that he has stood for over, in recent years, they are very, very good at getting on the front foot and seizing the agenda and trying to make that work for them. Now, what he could have done, he may have anticipated what's likely to happen and just try and get ahead of the game.
And of course, it's a bear trap for the parliamentary authorities because they would then have to provoke a second by-election in a very short period of time, which would be embarrassing for them. So in many ways, he's been quite canny there.
Yeah, the parliamentary investigation, if he resigns as an MP, it will actually pause and then it will start again.
And it's politically more difficult for them to then cause another by-election, isn't it?
I think they're totally independent.
Because it might make them look silly.
But I think that
because he'll come back to them. You know what he'll do? He'll weaponise it. Oh my God, we've just had a by-election. Now they want another one.
Yeah,
how many by-elections?
They are independent, and I think if they will just look at the hard and fast rules.
Oh, that's fascinating. Listen, what does this all mean, Ryan, for the Reform UK brand?
I think I think I wouldn't say they've come unstuck over this, but the fact that the other parties aren't playing ball, you just wonder whether it's going to be painted as a slight hissy fit from Nigel Farage. But he's painting this as the establishment against him. He wants to come out fighting. Let's just see how this plans out. But I think if you're in a scenario where you've got 2 by-elections within a couple of months, I think it just makes the whole political class look a bit silly.
Most definitely. Well, you mentioned hissy fit. That was a line from Kemi Badenoch. Fishy 5 million, I thought was another good line. And overall characterising it as a gimmick. Briefly, if he had his time again, do you think Nigel would have declared the 5 million?
Well, it's one of these things where he thinks he's done nothing wrong, so he doesn't feel like he needs to. So I think he'll probably stuck to his guns.
Number 1 for Political Scoops. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us. The Sun newspaper, unmissable coverage of Westminster politics. And, of course, the paper will be all over that Clacton-on-Sea by-election like a rash. My thanks to Ryan Saby, who is the deputy political editor at the Sun newspaper. So much more to come. What do you think about this, folks? Will Nigel have the last laugh? 9:32 Talk Breakfast.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Talk Breakfast. What do you think about this? Will Nigel have the last laugh? Leslie, good morning, Mark. As a long-term Tory voter, after Kemi's appalling statement, I'm now going to join Reform UK. Nick in London, good morning, young Mark. If my father was Nigel Farage and a man came to my door and a large black saloon parked strategically across my driveway at 7:41, then the passenger window rolled down, I think that I would be very nervous indeed, given past threats. Just watch the video closely. What about this, Shirley in Northamptonshire? The other political parties will not stand in Clacton as they are terrified of the humiliation. And Tom says, hey up, Mark. On Farage's daughter being hounded by the press, have they not learnt anything from the death of Diana? Leave families alone, press. Tom, thank you for that. Well, it's interesting that you should raise Diana. A devastating verdict for Prince Harry in the High Court yesterday and his legal action against the publishers of the Daily Mail, who have thrown out all of their allegations in regard to unlawful information gathering. Let's get reaction from the Queen of Royal Reporting, live in the capital. What a week to be here. Kinsey Schofield. Good morning, Kinsey.
Good morning. That's right. We found out on Thursday that we could expect this verdict. It had, it was my understanding it would take a few months. So for a moment, I forgot that this was on the horizon, and for it to hit while Harry's here, and he's supposed to be promoting the Invictus Games. This is supposed to be a redemption tour. This has to be a major blow not only to the ego, but to his plans over the next few days. What does this verdict do to his reputation? Because we've had controversy around the charities. He's lost control of Sentebale, a charity that he co-founded. He's being sued by Sentebale. And being sued. Yes, he's being sued by Sentebale right now. For defamation or something? For defamation, yeah, absolutely. By the charity? Yes, his own charity that he started. Not ideal. Then you've got African Parks. He's on the board of that, and he used to be the chief operating officer of it, and they're shrouded in allegations about the abuse of African tribes. Then you've got the Archwell Foundation, or Philanthropies, or whatever it's called this week. Whatever it is. Which has effectively been shuttered. And then you've got Invictus, which is losing sponsors left, right and centre. And now this? No, this is a major blow to Prince Harry. And I know that you cover him the way I do. I mean, we've seen an aggressive shift in the last 6 months to a year, showing up in Ukraine, challenging President Trump, challenging Putin, writing the article in the New Statesman about anti-Semitism in the UK. He wants to be taken as a serious character. And here you have a judgment and a judge that says you're not a very credible witness. And I think it hits. It jeopardizes his authority. And when you cover him, it's hard to look at the guy and not think about the references to the Elizabeth Arden cream in his book. I mean, I don't take him seriously at all, but it's certainly his objective to be taken more seriously. Why? Because commercially he needs it. Nobody's going to give you millions of dollars to stand on a speaking or to join a speaking circuit if they don't really buy into what you're selling. But, B, I also think he wants to be taken as the serious character so that Ravik reconsiders his security. Oh, I'm in Ukraine. I'm in jeopardy. I need this security. So this is a blow to something we've watched him slowly building from over the last 6 to 12 months. And he hasn't had this armed protection that he craves for this UK return, which surely means he'll never get it. Well, I mean, I'm wondering how often he'll come back after such a devastating trip. Truly, he's not getting anything he wants. I think he wants a picture with his father. I think he wants to bring his children here. I think that he wanted positive headlines. I think he wanted to win this court case. I think he wanted everybody to be like, oh, look at Prince Harry engaging with these sweet children that are, the typical balloon animal photos that we get from him when he goes to some of the charity events that we expect to see him at this week. And that's not happening. I mean, this entire trip is all about defeat. And I would have said it was about defeat before that. For Meghan Markle to return to the UK, that's an admission of professional defeat. That's an admission of we need help, in my opinion. But they're not going to get those glossy headlines about the sweet reunion between Markle and the man that walked her down the aisle, King Charles.
And things weren't exactly going swimmingly prior to yesterday's devastating and very expensive verdict.
Right.
Because we had a war of words between the palace and the Sussexes about whether or not Harry had been offered accommodation at Buckingham Palace. The palace say that they offered accommodation and that no response was given. The Sussexes have said, we accepted the accommodation.
But they accepted it after the deadline.
Which is a one-week deadline.
Actually, we got to get the timeline right. They were supposed to give... Harry has been planning this trip since January, and for months this offer's been on the table to have a royal residence.
Which is very generous.
Very generous. And Friday was the deadline. Harry rejects the offer on Saturday, changes his mind... Probably after his security team said, realistically, son, there is no safer place for you to be in London than inside Buckingham Palace. So then Harry goes back over the weekend and says, I've changed my mind. Can I please stay at Buckingham Palace? And the palace says no, because they need weeks, if not days, to plan for, they've got to get food in the building. It's a construction site realistically right now, and an office. So it's not a lived-in space. They would need to do hospitality, get a chef on board, get food and beverage in. They would need to provide the staff that could take care of Harry and his children. And they were also preparing for 4 people plus an entourage. And then Harry's calling and saying, just kidding, it's going to be me. What a waste of resources.
And then, of course, the security implications. If he was going to be staying, they would need more personnel on site. All of that has to be planned. And it demonstrates something about Harry's attitude, that he thinks he can chop and change like this.
Absolutely.
Entitled, arrogant, out of touch.
And he still thinks that his dad, at the snap of a finger, can change things for him. And King Charles proves over and over again that he wants to be reasonable, he wants to be fair, and that he's not like that. He's not he's not going to call and make special arrangements for you security-wise. You know, it's unconstitutional. He's not going to make sure that you win in, you know, it's actually King Charles who advised him not to sue the Daily Mail, and here we are, Harry with egg on his face, and King Charles trying to keep his distance because he wants to be drawn into this drama. And I just think his father has proven to be a pretty fair individual that wants things to play out the way that they're supposed to, and he's not going to pull strings for his son.
And Americans, if we know anything about the Americans, they like a winner. What will Meghan make of this defeat in the High Court yesterday, which, by the way, is on top of January 2024, when Harry withdrew his legal action against the publishers of the Mail on Sunday in regard to their coverage of his request for armed royal protection. He changed his mind on that one, and he had to pay £750,000 worth of costs of the Mail, and probably the same amount for himself. So he's been here before.
Yeah, he has been here before, and I'm so curious to know your opinion on this. Well, I mean, we could debate all day whether they were ever really coming. I always felt like this was a setup to villainize King Charles and to reposition Harry and Meghan as the victims.
A bear trap.
Yeah, exactly, because they have monetized being victims over the last 6 years. But if we were to hypothetically imagine that Meghan Markle was really coming, you know, my thought process was she will absolutely be by Harry's side on Friday if he wins, but he's lost now. I don't think she wants to be on the arm of a loser. And what does Meghan Markle do when Harry's going through difficult times publicly? She disappears. When you think about how Jimmy Kimmel was tearing into him over Spare, and he's trying to promote... Where's Meghan when he's promoting Spare? She disappears. Where was Meghan when he lost his rabbit case, when he sat down and was reaming the royal family to the BBC? Meghan mysteriously disappears. When Harry is going through difficult times, Meghan is MIA. She's nowhere to be found. So I don't think, even though Harry's team is teasing we could get a Meghan Markle appearance on Friday, I don't think we'll see her, because when Harry's having a difficult time, Meghan doesn't want to be involved.
History teaches us that if you are not of use to the Duchess of Sussex, you're in a very lonely place. And that looks like the place where Harry is right now.
Yeah, I mean...
Because what's he bringing to the plan? You know, she's a hustler. She's trying to get these deals going. She's selling her clothing online and she's pitching endlessly to Netflix, not that they're listening. Meanwhile, Harry sees himself, as you've said, as this global figure, this philanthropist, this influencer. No one's going to be influenced by Harry now.
I think he's going to have a very hard time convincing anyone that he has anything of value to say. And, you know, there was the Project Thaw theory that was happening, and some people...
Richard Eden, Daily Mail.
Yeah, and they some people would say, well, here's proof of Project Thaw. Harry gives a speech about Ukraine and President Trump, and then the King does a very similar speech in the United States. Harry does this anti-Semitism article. The King shows up, you know, and is meeting with victims of, you know, an anti-Semitic attack.
In Golders Green, yeah.
I would just say, Harry has access to the King's agenda. Harry knows his father. Harry's team knows the King. I mean, the King has been pretty consistent over the last 70 years. And I think that Harry is trying to look more in line with him because if the Project Thaw conversation continues, then he still looks like he might have it in. He could be a royal again. And again, they can continue to milk this poor family who they have been so hateful towards over the last 6 years.
Where is Harry's head at? What do you think his mood is this morning? We're sitting in central London. It's exactly where Harry is, not staying at Buckingham Palace or Clarence House or St James's Palace. Probably a Holiday Inn Express. It's got to be budget because he's got no money now. But where do you think he's at mentally?
Angry. I think he is livid. You know, what happened yesterday should have humbled him, and he should have sat back and thought, you know, do I need to take on every fight? Do I need to litigate every issue? Do I need to fight back every headline? He really should have...
From articles that were written 15 years ago.
Exactly. And how... Sorry to take up for the Duchess of Sussex, but how must it have felt for Meghan to hear Harry crying in court about how some of these articles broke up him and his beloved? I mean, what does it say about that relationship?
I cannot compute why Meghan Markle came up in the High Court.
That too.
Given that the articles pertain to 15 years ago, why are you talking about Meghan?
That too, but he was sitting there stewing on the fact that he lost, I believe it was Chelsea, right? Wasn't he?
Chelsea debut,
yeah, wasn't it?
Oh, that's true.
He's stewing on the fact that he lost this girlfriend over some of these articles. And if I'm Meghan
he said
Markle,
I couldn't have that long relationship because of the press's behaviour.
And if I'm Meghan Markle, I'm going, why? That would be like Meghan Markle sitting in an interview talking about Trevor.
Well, I can tell you that our executive producer is very happily married now. Oh. And it's not understandable because who wouldn't want to be married to the Mitchells?
He is a cutie.
But the ex's name's are banned in their household.
Oh.
So if Harry's, like, you know, singing like a canary, yapping away about Chelsea this, Chelsea that, it's not a good look.
No, if Meghan did an interview and talked about Trevor Ingleson, we would all be like, what is going on?
Meghan's in a jam, Harry's in a pickle. And as for the flower sprinkles, don't get me started. So it's going to be damage limitation for the next couple of days. And by the way, I mean, Invictus, it's not exactly the land of milk and honey, that project, is it?
I have heard that months ago, leadership was stressed about Meghan's involvement. And looking at the circus that this trip has become, you know, I guarantee you that there are conversations happening behind the scenes about how frustrating these two, you know, so read Betrayal, which I know you have, front to back. Tom Bauer goes into great detail about how detrimental Harry and Meghan's presence was to Senebale. Their toxic brand, you know, it drove fundraising down the drain.
Audi pulled out, and many others.
And they really struggled to generate revenue for this charity. They really struggled to generate any sort of fundraising, I should say, because Harry and Meghan had become such a toxic brand. And I think we're seeing something very similar with Invictus. It's the Meghan show. I mean, she changes outfits 6 times. You can go on the app and see Meghan. I imagine we'll see her with wounded veterans, and we can buy the sweater she's wearing while she's seated next to these people, similar to what happened in Australia, where she was with sick children trying to shill her clothing. And the veterans deserve more. I mean, I bet you Harry would say the veterans deserve more.
What is your prognosis of the marriage? Because Tom Bauer, notwithstanding his criticism of the couple and their well-reported double standards, he thinks that they are in love. and that it's quite a solid bond. I'm not so sure.
Yeah, Tom Bauer says that to me too. God love Tom Bauer. Maybe he's just a sucker for love, Mark Dolan.
Correct. Well, he has got a big heart.
He does. He's a cuddle bug.
He's a softie.
But I think that when it's you against the world, you probably run out of options. I mean, I've always thought that they would stay together until the children were adults, because that's just how Prince Harry is. And I don't ever think that Prince Harry would leave Meghan. I feel like Meghan would leave Harry. There's also laws in California where Meghan receives more, or Meghan benefits more, if they've lived in California and have been married in California for 10 plus years. Like, the joke is that Tom Cruise divorced Nicole Kidman on, like the day before their 10-year anniversary. And so I think we should keep that in mind too. But you can't fail as much as they fail professionally and not have it affect you behind the scenes, right? When you lose a job or when you don't get the promotion that you wanted, it does affect things at home. And so much of what they've sold themselves on, I mean, the Netflix, Spotify, they were selling themselves, and the world has rejected whatever they were trying to sell because themselves they're not authentic. Like, it wasn't true to what we know who they are. But so I do think that there's probably difficulties at home because professionally they've not been thriving.
Well, the reason why you're #1 on YouTube for royal reporting, Kinsey Schofield Unfiltered, is because you call out the truth, which of course the Sussexes hate, which is why they're endlessly suing newspapers. And it's interesting because you've suggested that the laws around alimony and marriage status, you need to do a decade living in California. Well, they got married in 2018. They moved to the States. Well, they reached California by what, the end of 2020?
Yes, thanks to Tyler Perry.
There you go. So therefore, 2030 is...
should we get a countdown clock on our YouTubes?
The end date, at which point Meghan instructs lawyers and the rest will be history. And Harry has got a few more days in the UK. What are you hearing about... You've said that you don't think it's possible that Meghan never planned to come in the first place. So does that mean it's unlikely that the King is going to meet his grandchildren?
I don't think the King's going to meet his grandchildren. I think if the King was definitely going to meet his grandchildren, there would be a space for that family at Buckingham Palace.
So it's been 4 years since he last met them. Mm-hmm. He's an older man. He still has cancer.
Yes, he's living with cancer.
Time is of the essence.
But you know what? Thomas Markle, Thomas Markle, Thomas Markle. It looks vile for them to continue to chase after King Charles, who I love. I love King Charles.
He's a decent man.
He's a decent man. But to pursue only one side of the family, it looks so shameless. We know why they want the children to have a relationship with King Charles, aside from an inheritance. It's because they want that royal aura. They need that. I mean, these are American children with titles. It's insulting. 1776, celebrating 250 years. And these kids are running around a playground in Montecito with prince and princess titles. And Harry and Meghan are obsessed with that royal relationship. If this was a true pursuit of compassion, empathy, and love, then Thomas Markle would have received a phone call or a meeting by now as well. This is commercial-driven, it's money-driven, and it's shameless.
For unmissable royal coverage and the biggest royal scoops, head to YouTube and Kinsey Schofield Unfiltered, who is extra unfiltered today, positively cloudy, let me tell you. Humming with B vitamins.
Thank you. It's the Red Bull.
There you go. She's like a live culture yogurt. Listen, brilliant to see you in the studio. Enjoy your trip to London. You're looking fantastic. She's the only person smiling because Harry ain't. He's crying into his soup. Lots more to come. This is Talk Breakfast 9:52.
The thing that most makes me angry about Keir Starmer talking about the need to defend our country, and he's gone out of his way to not make the tough decisions to actually do the thing to defend our nation. It's cowardly, and I think it's treacherous.
Nothing to say on immigration, nothing to say on benefits, nothing to say on jobs, nothing to say on tax. Absolutely appalling. If this is the solution the country's been waiting for, then we are in a very, very bad place.
People up and down the country are asking why they are always being put second. They work every day, they get up, they pay their bills, they look after their kids, and yet the other side of the social contract is not being held up.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
(9:55) Talk Breakfast. Mark Dolan in for Jeremy Kyle, who's back tomorrow at 6 a.m. Thank you for your company this morning. Really enjoyed it. Julia is up at 10. She'll be in the studio in just a second. Of course, I'm returning to Talk Breakfast Friday, Saturday and Sunday. Don't miss it. Will Nigel have the last laugh? Here's a voice note from Ken.
Morning, Mark. Ken here in Dorset. I could say an awful lot about this Nigel Farage situation, but I'll restrict it to this. It seems that the media and the establishment are trying to frame this as a farce created by Nigel Farage. Well, in fact, it's them who have created the farce by not being willing to stand candidates against him. It's a pantomime of their own making.
Thank you for that, Ken. That's the last voice note of the show. The last call is in the possession of Laura Jane in Hampshire. Good morning, LJ.
Morning, Mark. I hate to do this just before Julia is on because she can't stand my conspiracy theories, but this is David and the Goliath, and Goliath is the establishment full on working together behind the scenes to do everything they can. I always said in 2024 that they would do everything in their power, and it's hotting up and it's going to get hotter. They really are gunning for him. And I think the second by-election will happen. That's why they're holding fire. I think, the 10% will be intact and will be sort of Conservatives restore, and they'll get together and they'll get the 10. So this election, by-election, is almost obvious. It's the second one that's going to be dangerous.
And do you think that Nigel's done the right thing in the last 24 hours by resigning his seat? Was it a good move?
I think it was a good move because, it's obvious they're going to find him guilty because, it's just MPs from the establishment on the committee. So yes, it's his only chess move at the moment was to be ahead of the game and to get the people of Clacton to concentrate on his understanding what his finances are, and I think. It was his only chess move, and it was brilliant, and it did bring the focus back in. But I think it's going to get worse before it gets better, and I think that's what the reform is all about, reforming the establishment. And boy, are they worried! And I think it's going to get dirtier.
And you're right; it's going to be a very bumpy ride. Will Nigel have the last laugh in the end, though, Laura Jane? Do you think that he loses a couple of battles but wins the war?
I jolly well hope so. I'm off. Yeah, is the answer. I do hope so, and I will do everything in my small power to help. But it's going to be tough because the establishment ain't going down, without a big fight.
Well, do you worry for Nigel's mental well-being? Because I mean, he must have the spirit of a warrior after what he's been through.
No, I think, he's got the fight. We saw it yesterday. He's been re-energized, as it were, and that's his sort of nature, and he's been in the game long enough. And I hope that everybody around him, Richard Tice and Zia, I hope they support him in that sense and understand that he's actually younger than me, I think, I seem to remember. But, it's not, I wouldn't want to be in his shoes for all the tea in China, but I do think there is a terrific strain on him, and I